Hey guys, my name is Joseph Brendan, and in this course, I am going to show you how to design a mobile app from scratch. Now, this mobile app will be a stock investing mobile app that users can use to invest in the stocks of companies that they would like to invest in. So, here is a demonstration of the app that we are going to design. Now, over here, we have the splash screen of the app, which is what's going to show up when you launch the app. Now, let's go to the next page here. Now, this is the page where the user will have to select their next action, which is either to log in as an existing user or to get started as a new user. So I would go ahead and I would click on get started, just like a new user would do. And here on this page, the new user will be required to sign up to this application with an email address, a phone number, and a password. Now, when the new user does that, the new user will be taken to this page where the new user will have to enter a verification code that's being sent to the phone number of that new user. Now, when the phone number of the new user is verified, it means that the new user is now a registered user on this application. And the next thing the user is going to do is to click on the proceed button here. And when the user does that, the user will be taken to the home page of the application, which is this page here. And here on the home page of this application, over here, the account balance of the user will be displayed here. Also, the user will have a button here that can be used to fund the account on this application. And right over here, the user will have a list of recent transactions that they have carried out on this application. Now, coming down here, the user will see a banner here that they can click on to get a referral link that can be used to invite friends to have an account on this app. Now, at the bottom here, we have the navigation section of this app. Currently, we are on the home page of the app. Now, let's navigate to the invest page, which is the page where the user will have the features that they can use to invest in stocks. So I'd come here and I would click on invest. When I do that, I would be taken to the invest page, which is this. And over here on the invest page, you can see that we have a display of cash and assets owned by the user. And right after that, over here, we have a list of top stocks that the user can invest in. And also we have the investment portfolio of that user over here, which is a list of all the investments that the user had made on this app. Now, let's say the user is trying to invest in one of the stocks listed here. Let's say this one, yeah? Now, if the user clicks on it, the user will be taken to the details page of that stock that they clicked on. And on this details page, we are going to have information about the stock and the company that owns the stock. Now, if the user likes what they see here, the user will go ahead to click on the invest button here. And when the user clicks on that button, the user will be required to enter the amount that they wish to invest in that stocks with. Now, when the user enters the amount and the user clicks on the proceed button here, the user will see a summary of the investment that they are about to make. And when the user is okay with what they see here in the summary, the user will be required to enter their secret pin here and then click on the invest button here. And when the user does that, it means that the investment has been successful. So this app that I just demonstrated here is what we are going to design in this course from scratch. Now, before we start designing this app, I would love to break down the stages of our workflow for this project so that you can understand the execution process of designing products that are actual business solutions. So here are the stages of our workflow. First things first, the stakeholders of this project, which is the owner of the project or the company we are working for, will present us with a problem that they would want us to design for. Now, when they present this problem to us, they are also going to tell us about the users, which are the people facing the problem that they want us to design for. Now, after that, the stakeholders will state their expected goals for the project. Now, after the stakeholders present a problem and state their expected goals to us, the next stage of our workflow will be for us, the UX designers, to empathize with the users. Now, after we empathize with the users facing the problem, we are going to create what we call a problem statement. And after creating this problem statement, the next stage of our workflow will be the stage where we will have to come up with ideas that can be best business solutions to the problems highlighted in the problem statement. Now, when we are able to get an idea for the problems in the problem statement, the next action will be for us to design that idea into a testable prototype. And after designing that idea into a testable prototype, we will go ahead to test the design to be sure that it is able to solve the problems in the problem statement. So let's get to work. Now, I would come here in Figma and I would use a FigJam file to work on all the analytical parts of our workflow. So let's create a FigJam file. And to do that, come here and click on the new FigJam file button there. When you do that, you have created a FigJam file, as easy as that. And I would like to mention that if you are new to using FigJam, you have nothing to worry about. It's a really simple tool to use. Just follow along and you'd see that at the end of this course, you'd be good with using FigJam. So I would close this, and the next thing I'll do after creating a FigJam file is to give the FigJam file a name. So I would call this Stocks FigJam. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Now, after giving this FigJam file a name, the next thing to do is to outline the stages of our workflow here in FigJam. So let's do that. So first things first, I would zoom in to 200%. I would come here to zoom in and I would select zoom to 200% here. And when I zoom into 200%, I would use a square shape here to write down a headline for our workflow. So I would keep this there. I would select the text tool now so that I can write my text. And I would say workflow stages. Then I would come here and I would align the text to the left. And I would change the color of the rectangle to this. And that's okay. So the next thing I would do is to have a sticky note where I would outline the workflow stages in. So to create a sticky note in FigJam, I would come here and I would select the sticky note tool here. When I select it, I would come here and I would click on the FigJam canvas to have this. Now let's select this and let's expand the width to align with our sticky note. So first things first, I would change the color of my sticky note to this. Then I would click on this add text placeholder here so that I can write down all of those workflow stages that I talked about. So I would like to make this a list and I would like it to be a bulleted list. So I would come here and I would select the bulleted list property here. Then I would write down the first workflow stage, which is this. It says stakeholders present the problem and the users facing the problem. Now I would create another list item, which is going to be the next stage of our workflow. And that's going to be where the stakeholders will define the goals for this project. So I would say define goals. Let's come here and let's create some space here. Now let's outline the next stage of our workflow. After the goals are defined, we, the UX designers, will empathize with the users. So let's come here and let's create this space also. Now, after we, the UX designers, empathize with the users, the next stage of our workflow will be where we are going to create a problem statement. So I would say create problem statement. So let's come here and let's create this space. Now, after we create a problem statement, the next stage of our workflow will be the stage where we are going to come up with an idea that can solve the problems listed in the problem statement. Now, after we come up with a best idea that can solve the problems in the problem statement, the next stage of our workflow will be the stage where we are going to design that idea into a testable prototype. So I would say design prototype here. And after we design that idea into a testable prototype, we are going to move over to the next stage of our workflow, which is going to be the stage where we are going to test that idea that we have designed into a prototype. So I would just call that test, and I would have that spaced. Now we have outlined our workflow stages here. So just to make this better, I would select all of these and I would make all of the text bold. To have that, I would come here, I would select this text and I'll make it bold also. Now I would zoom back to 100% to see what we have. And this is okay. So I would use the hand tool, which is this. You can come here to click on it to select it, or just press the H key on your keyboard to have it selected. And I would grab and shift our canvas to this point. So now we have outlined our workflow stages here, right? Now the next thing to do is for us to outline all of the actions that will be taken under each of this workflow stage. So this means that we are now going to break down each of these stages one after another so that we know what actions to take at each of these stages and how to optimize for our results. So I would select the move tool here by clicking on it or by pressing the V key on my keyboard to select it. And I would come here, I would select the square tool there so that I can create this shape like this. And over here, I would write a text inside this shape, and that text will be this first stage. I would select all of this text here. Then I would use Control C. If you are using a Mac, it's Command C. I would use that to copy that text and I would paste it inside this square shape like this. Now I would expand this to this point. Now this is the first stage of our workflow, right? I would come here now and I would have a sticky note here right under that. Now in this sticky note, I would write out what's going to happen at this stage, which is the first stage of our workflow. Now this stage is the stage where the stakeholders will present the problem to us and also let us know about the users that they want us to design for. So in this course, I would like us to assume that we have a stakeholder somewhere, or we have a company somewhere that wants us to design an app that you can use to invest in stocks for them, right? So I would paste this in here in this sticky note, which says users find it really hard to invest in stocks using existing investment apps due to information overload and complex presentation of information on the apps. Now, who are the users? The users are stock investors in Nigeria. So having this here means that the stakeholders have presented us with a problem and the users facing the problem. So this is sorted. So let's change the color of this sticky note, something like this, to differentiate it from this one here. And let's come here, let's change this to that to differentiate it also. So this is the first stage of our workflow, and we have seen what's going to happen here at this stage. So let's look at the next stage here, which is the stage where the stakeholders will define the goals of the project. So I would come here, I would select this and I would duplicate it. To duplicate is Control D. If you are using a Mac, it's Command D. So I would duplicate this and I would have it stay here. I would take out this text inside this shape and I would write define goals there. I can have in brackets, say by stakeholders. So I would keep this here. Now I would come here also, I would duplicate this and I would have it stay right under this shape, which is our square shape, right? So inside this sticky note, I'll take all of these out. And I would also assume that we have stakeholders somewhere who sent us the goals that they want for this project. So let's assume that the stakeholders sent us this as their goal. And it says, research and help users simplify every task needed to make a stock investment. So what we have here so far is this. The stakeholders have presented us with a problem and the users facing the problem. And they have gone ahead to define their expected goal for this project. And the expected goal is that they want us to research and help users simplify every task needed to make a stock investment. So let's move over to the next stage of our workflow, which is the stage where we, the UX designers, will have to empathize with the users facing the problem. So I would come here, I would duplicate this, I would have this here, and I would say empathize. Now I would have this here also, and I'll take out all we have here. And at this empathize stage, this is actually the stage where we, the UX designers, will now get to work. So what do we do at this stage? What are the actions that we need to carry out at this stage so that we can say that we have properly empathized with the users facing the problem? So what we are going to do is to interview the users face to face or send out surveys digitally to the users. The purpose for that is so that we can understand the problems from the perspective of the people facing the problem. Now, after that, we are going to create what we call user personas, all under this empathize stage. So I would make this a list just like this to have that organized properly. And when we are done with the empathize stage, by carrying out these two actions here, the next thing we are going to do is to move over to the next stage of our workflow, which is the stage where we will have to create a problem statement. So I would come here, I would have this here, and I would change that to create problem statements. And I would have this stay here. So at this stage where you, the UX designer, will be needed to create a problem statement, what you do to create a problem statement is easy. Just state the problem of the users with all you have gathered from the previous stage, which is the empathize stage. So after you have interviewed the users to understand the problems from their perspective, and you have created user personas for each of the user, what you do is you would use all of that data to properly state the problem that the users are facing. Now, when you create the problem statement, which is you stating the problem properly, the next thing you do is to move to the next stage of our workflow, which is the ideate stage. Now, when you get to the ideate stage, let's have this here. When you get to the ideate stage, the actions that you take at the ideate stage are simple actions. All you'd have to do is this: launch a brainstorming session. Then during the brainstorming session, vote for the best idea. When you vote for the best idea, select the idea with the highest vote. And there you have gotten an idea that you can then take to the next stage of our workflow, which is the stage where we are going to design that best idea into a testable prototype. So before we go there, let's select this and let's make it a list like this. Now, let's come here and let's look at the next stage here, which is the design prototype stage. And when you get to this stage, what are the actions that you would need to take for you to properly design a workable prototype? We are going to look at the actions now. So I would have this stay here. I'll take all of these out. And the actions that we are going to take to properly design a prototype are all of this. First things first, we are going to create an information architecture for the best idea that we got from the ideate stage. When we create that information architecture, we are going to use that information architecture to create what we call a low fidelity prototype. Now, after we create that low fidelity prototype, we are going to test the low fidelity prototype. And when the test is successful, we are going to go ahead to create a high fidelity prototype for that best idea that we got from the Ideate stage. Now, after we create the high fidelity prototype, we are going to move over to the next stage of our workflow, which is the stage where we are going to need to test that high fidelity prototype. So I would come here, I would have this here, I would say test prototype, and I'll bring this here. I can just say usability testing here, and that's all. Let's come here and let's make all of these a list, and that's okay. So what we have here is a proper breakdown of our workflow. So I'd like to connect all of this so that we understand that these stages are to be followed one after another. So I would select the connector tool here. You can see where my mouse cursor is on. Click on it to select it. I would come here, I would select this point, click, hold and drag, and I would connect it with this other point here. I would select this also, connect it here. I would do that for all of these other items also. I would have all of them connected. So we are going to design our product by following the breakdown of this workflow. So now that we have outlined our workflow stages and we have broken down all of our workflow stages like this, the next thing we need to do is to start executing each of the actions that we have outlined here, one after another. So let's get to work. So the first stage of our workflow here is the stage where the stakeholders will present us with the problem and the users facing the problem, right? And as you can see, that stage is sorted because I assumed that a stakeholder presented us with this problem and the users facing the problem. So this stage is sorted. Now over to the next stage, which is the stage where the stakeholders will state their expected goals for the project. And that is sorted also. As you can see here, I also assumed that the stakeholders has stated their expected goals to us, which is to research and help users simplify every task needed to make a stock investment. Now over to the next stage, which is the stage where we, the UX designers, will get to work. And that is the Empathize stage. And under the Empathize stage here, these are the actions that we need to take. The first action is to interview the users face to face or send out surveys digitally to the users. Now, in this course, since this is a lesson, I can't show you how to set up a face-to-face interview, but I would show you how to create a digital survey using Google Forms. So let's do that. So I would come here in my browser and I would open a new tab, then come here. I would click on this menu icon here so that I can access my Google Apps. I would scroll down and I would click on Forms here. And when I do that, I would come here and I would click on blank there. Then a blank form will be created for me. Now I would give this form a title. I can call it Stock App UX Survey. And that's it. I would come here also and I would give the form a name. So I can call the form Stock App UX Survey also, or you can give it any name at all that you want to give it. Now, the next thing I would need to do is to have a form description just to describe what this survey form is all about. So I would come here and I would have this. And it says this survey is carried out by Vest Technologies and it is aimed at improving the experience of users who want to invest in stocks from an app without having complex steps. Now you can come up with a better description when you are doing this in real life. Now after that, I would start passing in the fields that I want the users to give me a response to. And the first field I would have here will be an email field. I would like to collect the email address of everyone that will take part in this survey. So that's going to be my first field here. So to collect email addresses, I would come here. I would click on settings here. Then I would expand responses here. You can see the responses section here. I would expand it. Then in front of this collect email addresses option here, I'll turn on this toggle button just like that, and that's sorted. Now, when I come back here, you would see that we have an email field here, which is going to require the user to enter their email address here. And as you can see, there is a red asterisk there showing that this is a mandatory field, which means that anyone taking this survey must have to enter their email address. Now, let's move over to the next question that we are going to ask anyone taking this survey. And that's going to be us asking them to enter their full name. Yeah. So I would come here. When I type that in, I would change this from multiple choice to short answer, just like that. Then I would come here and I would turn on this toggle button to make this field a required field, meaning that anyone taking this survey must have to enter their full name. And that's sorted. So I would come here and I would click on the plus sign here to add another question, just like that. Then this question will be country of residence. Now, this is important because coming from what the stakeholders presented to us as a problem and the users facing the problem, we could see that the stakeholders are actually trying to solve a problem for people living in Nigeria. So it is important to ask anyone taking this survey form where they reside. So if someone from Germany takes this survey by mistake or happenstance, then it means that when we are collating the data from this survey, we are actually going to ignore that person's input because the person is not based in Nigeria. So that's why it's going to be important to ask this question. So I would come here and I would make this required also. Now make sure this is set to short answer also. Then I would come here and I would click on this button to add another question. Now this question is going to be us asking anyone taking this survey to enter their age. And this is also important because usage of apps and the experience behind the usage of apps differs by age range. So I would ask this question and I would set this to short answer. Then I would make this a required question. So I would go ahead and I would add another question option here so that I can ask my next question, which is going to be us asking whoever is taking the survey to enter their profession. I would keep this set to short answer and I would make this required. Then I would add another question here. And this question is going to be us asking, have you invested in stocks from a mobile app? Now, this is going to be a yes or no answer. And Google Forms automatically suggest this because I have a question mark at the end of the question. Now, I would come here and I would click on yes as my first option, and I would click on no as my second option, and that's going to be fine. Then I would come here and I would make this a required question. Then I would add another question here, which is going to be select the goals you always love to achieve when investing in stocks from a mobile app. Now, I would have that in brackets saying select more than one. Now, I would come here and I would make sure this is a checkbox option. Now, me making this a checkbox option is because I want the person taking the survey to select more than one answer. So I would come here, I would type in my first option, which is going to be invest quickly. My second option will be fund my wallet with more than one option. The third option will be withdraw my dividends quickly. The fourth option will be easily access transaction history. And the final option here will be to save time. So this is me asking anyone taking this survey to tell us what they would love to achieve more when using a mobile app to invest in stocks. So these are all the options that they can choose from, and from the answers they select, we the UX designers will understand what to focus on when designing and what not to focus on when designing. So I would come here and I would make this a required question also, and that's fine. And I would add another question here, which is going to be me asking anyone taking this survey this question. It says, select the frustrations you face when investing with the app you are currently using to invest. So I would also give them the option to select more than one answer here. And I would have checkboxes selected here. So the first option here will be complex and unnecessary graphs. The second one will be long time to invest. And the third option will be excessive ambiguity of information. The fourth option will be unfriendly user interface. And the final option will be difficulty in funding wallet or account. Now, this is us asking whoever is taking this survey to tell us the problems that they have with any investment app that they are currently using. Now, from what they would select here, we, the UX designers, will understand the problems to tackle and what to completely avoid when designing our own investment app. So I would come here and I would make this a required question also. And the final question or the final request I would have in this survey is to have the person taking this survey to upload their picture. Now, this is not going to be a mandatory field. We are going to make it optional. If they like, they upload. If they like, they don't. So I would come here, I would click on the plus sign there to add a question. And I would come here and I would select file upload. Now I would come here and I would click on continue. And I would come here and I would say upload your image. And I would make sure this is not set to required. That's because I want it to be optional. And that's fine. So at this stage, I'd like for us to preview this survey to see how it will look like when it is sent out to the people facing the problem. So I would come here and I would click on this button here. You can see where my mouse cursor is on. When I click on it, I would have a preview of the survey. And this is it here. It looks okay. So let's come back here and let's click on send. When you click on send, you would have this pop-up show up here. Now you would come here and you would edit this message just in case you want to send this as an email to whichever person you want to send it to. So you would come here and you'd say Vest Technologies. There you would put in your own company's name. Vest Technologies has invited you to fill in a survey for UX research or whatever you want to say there. And that's fine. Now, this option is only when you want to send this survey form as an email directly to people. You would come here and you type in their email address. Let's say you type this in. You'd use comma, then type in the next email and the next email and the next email. Now, if you don't want to send this as an email, you have the option of sending this also as a link. Now, this option will make it possible for you to put this link up on your social media or send it through WhatsApp or send it through any other app to the public so that anyone that stays in Nigeria can stumble upon the link and take the survey. Now, to do that, come here and click here. When you click there, you would see the link here. Now, come here and click on this checkbox that says shorten URL. When you do that, you would have a shorter link. Now you would come here and just copy this link. When you copy it, then you can post it on LinkedIn, you can post it on Twitter, you can post it anywhere you want to post it, you can send it to anyone, and when they click on the link, they will be taken to the survey form for them to take the survey. Now, when they take the survey, you will be having the option to see their responses here. All you do is come back to the form, click on responses, and you would see all of the responses over here. Currently, I have 0 responses. So what's going to happen is I would take this survey myself. I would take it twice so that I would have 2 responses. And I would use those 2 responses to continue our research process. Now, take note, in real life, you would have more than 2 responses. So I would pause this video here. I would go ahead and I would take the survey myself twice. So I have taken the survey by myself twice, and these are my responses. As you can see here, we have this field that says who has responded, and these are the emails of the people that have responded, and these are their full names and all of that. Now, this summary tab here in the responses section will just give you a full summary of all the responses. Now, for you to attend to one response at a time, come here and click on the individual tab here. When you do that, Then you can come here and select the individual responses based on their email addresses. Currently, this email is ann@xyz.com, and all of these responses here, all of these answers are the answers of this particular user. If you want to see the answer from any other user, come here and select that with the email of that user. If I select chooks@xyz.com, you would see that I would have all of this show up here now. As you can see here, this is the email of Chooks, and this is the full name of Chooks, Chooks EK, and the country and city of residence is Nigeria, Enugu. The age is 24. The profession is importer. Have you invested in stocks? Yes. Have you invested in stocks from a mobile app? Yes. Select the goals you always love to achieve when investing in stocks from a mobile app. And Chooks said to invest quickly, to fund my wallet with more than one option, to easily access transaction history, and to save time. Now, the next question here is select the frustrations you face when investing with the app you are currently using to invest. And Chooks says long time to invest, complex and unnecessary graphs, excessive ambiguity of information, and non-friendly user interface. Now, for the other user, which is Anne, you can see the email of the user here, and the name of the user is Anne Folake, and the country and city of residence is Nigeria, Lagos. I know in my initial survey form, I did not include city of residence actually, but I just had to include that so that I can target the particular location where the user is staying. And the age is 24. The profession is mural artist. Have you invested in stocks? Yes. Have you invested in stocks from a mobile app? Yes. Select the goals you always love to achieve when investing in stocks from a mobile app. And Anne says to invest quickly, to fund my wallet with more than one option, easily access transaction history, save time. And for this question here, Anne selects long time to invest, complex and unnecessary graphs, excessive ambiguity of information, and non-friendly user interface. Now at the bottom here, you would also see that the date of submission and the time of submission is recorded. So I would come back here, and I would also like to let you know that you can export this response to a spreadsheet. Now, I would advise you that if you want to do that, come here, click on summary, then click on create spreadsheet. When you do that, you would have this option to select create a new spreadsheet or select existing spreadsheet. Now, if this is your first time, just create a new spreadsheet. Now, I would keep that selected. Come here and I would click on create. When I do that, I would have a new tab launched, and as you can see, all of my responses has been exported into this spreadsheet. Now, you can also choose to come here and make your analysis from this spreadsheet, and that's okay. So after you create your surveys and send them out, and the users or the people that you sent them out to send in their responses, you would go ahead to create what we call user personas for each and every user that sent in a response. So at this stage, I would like us to see how to create user personas. And take note, creating user personas is an action you take while you are at the Empathize stage. Now, just understand that this Empathize stage is the stage where you get to know the users better and understand their frustrations better. And that's because it's only when you understand a problem better that you can come up with a better solution for that problem. So let's go ahead and let's see how to create user personas for each of the user that sent in a response to our survey. So I would come here now and I would select the text tool here, and I would have this here. I would say user personas. I would keep that selected. I would change this text from a normal text to a subheading text, and I would make this bold. Then I would come here and I would change the color of this text to that. So this is going to be our user persona section. Let's duplicate this. Let's come up here. Let's call this section workflow breakdown. However you want to call it is fine. That's okay. So I would scroll down to the user persona section, and the first thing I would have here is the image of the user that I want to create a persona for. So I would come here, I would select the square tool here to have a square shape here, which I am going to use to place the image of that user in. Now, this is necessary whether the user sends in an image or not. You can just have these here. If the user does not send in an image, then you leave this blank. Go ahead and do the rest. But if the user sends in an image, then you place the image in here. Now, there is one way to place an image into a shape here in FigJam. All you have to do is keep the shape selected, right click on it, then go to plugins and use the Unsplash plugins for that. So I would come here, I would launch that plugin, and I would come in here and I would type in African woman, so I can have an image of an African woman show up there. So I would come here and I would select this, and that's okay. So the next thing to do is to have all of these details about this person who has this image. Now, the name here is Anne Folake. The country and city is Nigeria, Lagos. The age is 24. Profession, mural artist. Now, over here, I would say Anne is a mural artist resident in Lagos, Nigeria. Anne is also a stock investor who invests in stocks with existing stock investing apps in Nigeria. And this is like a summary about her personality. Now, I would go ahead and I would highlight her frustrations with the existing investment apps that she uses in Nigeria, and I would also highlight the goals that she aims to achieve with an investment app. So I would come here and I would have this here. I would paste this, and over here, these are the things that she wishes that she had as an experience with an investment app. And these are her current frustrations. Now, all of these details about Anne was gotten from the response that she gave us when she took this survey that we created. So you can see how this connects. So let's go ahead and let's create a user persona for the other user that took the survey. So that is going to be Chooks. So I would come here, I would have this shape here, and I would run the Unsplash plugin on that shape, and I would type in African man, and I would go with this here, and that's okay. So I would have this here for Chooks. This is his name and his country and city, age, profession, and all of that. I would also highlight his goals and frustrations, and that's fine still. So what we have done so far is this. We have concluded the empathize stage. We have gotten to know about the problem from the perspective of the users, and we have created user personas for each user that took our survey. So we are going to move ahead to the next stage of our workflow here, which is the stage where we are going to create a problem statement based on all we have gathered during the empathize stage. Now, this really makes sense because you can create a better problem statement when you understand the problem better. And the way to understand the problem better is to empathize with the people facing the problem. And that's what we have done. So let's go ahead and let's create our problem statement based on what we have learned. So I'll duplicate this. I would come here. I would say problem statement. And for me, going by all we have learned from the empathize stage, this is my problem statement. My problem statement states that users are frustrated with existing investment apps as a result of excessive ambiguity of information and complex steps. These concerns negatively affect the experience of these users. Now, this is my problem statement, and this is the problem that I'll try to solve. So if we come up here, you would see that we have empathized with the users and we have created a problem statement. So the next stage of our workflow is the ideate stage, which is the stage where we have to come up with an idea that can solve the problems that we have in the problem statement. And what actions are we to take at this stage? So at the ideate stage, the first thing we are going to do is to set up a brainstorming session where we are going to invite other designers product managers, business managers, lawyers, software engineers, and so on and so forth. Now, when we invite all of these people, we are going to present them with enough information about the problems in the problem statement and ask them to come up with ideas that can possibly solve the problems in the problem statement. Now, when each and every one of these people that we have invited come up with an idea, the next thing to do is to read out all of these ideas to everyone and call a vote for the best idea. Now, the idea with the highest vote should be selected. And when that is done, it means that you are ready to move to the next stage of our workflow, which is the stage where you would have to design that idea into a testable prototype. So before we move over to this stage here, I'd like to come here. I would also highlight that this stage is the Ideate stage. This is the Ideate stage, and since this is going to be a brainstorming session stage, and obviously I can't have a brainstorming session here in this lesson, it's going to be something that you would set up with the people you want to set it up with, be it on Zoom, Discord, be it real life, anyhow you want to set it up, that's fine. So I'll just highlight this stage here, and what I'm going to do is I would assume that I conducted a brainstorming session offline just so that we can learn better. And I would also assume that during that brainstorming session, we arrived at an idea. So I would have this here, selected idea, and I would paste this as our selected idea. Now, this is the selected idea for this course. It says, create an investment app where graphs are represented with text, where users will have the option to fund their account and wallet via bank transfer or their debit cards, where recent transaction history will be easily accessible, and where plain and easy to understand English will be mostly used. Now, if you look at this idea, you'd see that this idea solves the problems that we have in this problem statement. And this problem statement was gotten from all we learned during the Empathize stage. And we were able to learn all we learned during this stage because we created a survey form and sent out the survey to users. So you can see how everything connects. So now that we have an idea that we can use to solve the problem, the next stage here is the design prototype stage. And at this stage, the actions that we need to take are all of these. First things first, we need to create an information architecture for this best idea that was selected during the Ideate stage. So I would come here, I would scroll down to this point, and I would have this here. I would say information architecture. Now, before we create the information architecture, let's understand what an information architecture is and why it is important to create one. So the information architecture of a mobile app is the way you organize and arrange information on the mobile app that will help the users of that mobile app to accomplish their task on that mobile app without a bad experience. So it is in the information architecture that you decide what features and what information will exist on each page of the app and each step of the app. So let's go ahead and let's create an information architecture for this idea. Now, the way to start creating your information architecture is to first of all define the goals of the users who will use the app. Then define the task that the users have to complete to achieve their goals on the app. So I would come here and I would have this here. So this here is the goal of the user, to invest with a good experience. Now the user task here are the actions that the user will have to take to achieve this goal. Now, what are the tasks? The user will have to sign up to the application as a new user or log in as an existing user, then fund their account or their wallet, then use the fund that they have in their account or wallet to invest in any stock of their choice. So if they can accomplish this task, this task and this task, it means that they have achieved their goal on that app. So after defining the goals of the user and stating the task that the user has to complete to achieve that goal, we are going to go ahead to create our information architecture flow. And for the sake of time, I would speed up this process and I would explain it so that you can understand. So what we have here is our information architecture flow. And I would zoom in so that I can break down this flow one after another and also show you how to come up with a flow like this. This is the start point of the flow. This is where the user launches the app. So when the user launches the app, the user will have two options, one to sign up and one to log in. So let's go with the sign up flow here. Now, if the user is trying to sign up, the user will be required to sign up with their email address, phone number, and password. And after this step, the user will have to verify their phone number. Now, after the phone number is verified, the user will be taken to the home page of the application. When the user gets to the home page of the application, the user will have all of these options here. And the first route or the first option here will be the menu icon, which will be on the home page. The user will also have their account balance displayed on the home page. The user will have a fund account option that they can use to fund their account, still on the home page. And still on the home page, the recent transactions by the user will be displayed there on the home page. Now, still on the home page, we are going to have a referral banner. Still on the home page, we are going to have an invest route that the users can take if they wish to invest in stocks. Now, still on the home page, we are going to have a transact option, just in case the user wishes to deposit or withdraw. So all of this is on the home page. Now let's look at the flow of the first item here, which is the menu icon. Now, if the user clicks on the menu icon, which is on the home page, the user will see all of these options: recent transactions, card management, investment portfolio, request statement, and settings. Now, just for the sake of those who don't know what a menu icon is, if you go to an app or a website using your mobile phone, you would always have this icon here at the top that when you click on it, you would have a drop down or you would have a menu bar sliding from the left or from the right. Now, that's what we call a menu icon, and most mobile apps have that. So this is going to be all that will show up when the user accesses the menu icon route. Now, for the account balance, all that's going to show up there is available balance, and that's all. Now, for the fund account option, this is the flow. The user will have to choose a method, and this is important for the experience because from our user research, it was clear to us that the users actually want an experience where they would have the option to fund their account with more than one option. So when they choose a method, then they would go ahead to fund their account with that method that they have chosen. So that's for the fund account route, right? Now, for the recent transactions route, all the user will have when they access a recent transaction will be the transaction details, and that's okay. Now we have the referral banner option here, and when the user access that route, they would have a referral promo code that they can copy, and send to a friend to join the app for all of that and all of that, and that's fine. Now we have the invest route here. When a user accesses this route, the user will see list of stocks that they can invest in and will also see their stock portfolio that they had invested in. So if the user access one of the stocks that's been listed, the user will see the detail for that stock. And if they like what they see in the detail, they will go ahead to invest. And that's a good flow. So if you come here, we have this route here, which is the transact route. When the user accesses this route, the user will have the option to make a deposit, which is also like funding the account you get. And the user will also have the option to make a withdrawal from their account. So this is just the basic information architecture flow for this app. And it is always important for you to create this information architecture so that you would understand and organize the steps that the user will take on the app. It is also important so that you can also streamline the core features that each page of your app will have. Now, if you remember, that was the sign up route. The login route is still the same because all you have to do here to log in is just enter your email address and your password. Then you'll be taken to the home page still. When you get to the home page, every other thing is the same. So that's that. If you have any questions on the information architecture here, draw my attention to it and I'll be there to help. So if you come here now, in our flow breakdown, you'd see that under the design prototype stage, we have created our information architecture. The next action at this stage is to create a low fidelity prototype of the best idea using the information architecture. Now, before we do that, I would love to explain what a low fidelity prototype is. So a low fidelity prototype is a dummy version of your final design for an app. Now, the question you may ask is this: why do we need to design a dummy version? Now, this is it. Designing a dummy version is important because at this stage of trying to figure everything out, your design and your design process can be subject to lots of changes and inputs from the stakeholders. Now, it's just like building a dummy house first before you build the main house. Now, if you use paper to build a dummy house first before building the main house, it's going to be a lot easier when the owner of the house comes to make a correction or comes to make a change. Since it's a paper, you don't have much to lose. All you have to do is just tear it and put it back in seconds. But if you go ahead to build the main house first and the owner of the house comes and says, okay, I don't want this design here, I don't want that there, it means that you'd have to break down that part of the house and rebuild that part of the house with all of the resources that you have put into building that part of the house. And that's going to be a lot more hectic compared to you using a paper to just build a prototype or a model of the house. So that's basically what a low fidelity prototype is. And that's why it is important for you to have a low fidelity prototype, then take that to the stakeholders for correction and changes and inputs and all of that. Now, when the low fidelity prototype has been accepted and agreed on, then you can go ahead to design the real app itself, which is the high fidelity prototype. So let's go ahead and let's see how to create a low fidelity prototype of our best idea. So we are going to do that using a Figma design file. So I would come here, I would go to Figma and I would create a new design file and I would call this stock investment app. And I would come here and I would rename the page 1 to low fidelity. And this page is going to contain all our low fidelity screens. So let's go ahead and let's start. So to design low fidelity screens is easy, and it is easy because you don't need a design system for that. Like, you don't need a style library to do that. You don't need a component library to do that. You don't need all of that. All you have to do is focus on the user task. So if you come here, you'd see that our user task on this app is to sign up or log in, fund your account or wallet, and invest. And if a user accomplishes all of these tasks, it means that the user will achieve their goal on this app, which is to invest in stocks. So we are going to design our low fidelity screens around these user tasks. So let's come back here in our Figma design file and let's see what it is to create low fidelity screens. All you have to do is select the frame tool, then go with any template of your choice. I would go with iPhone 13 Pro Max and I would have that. So the next thing I'll do is to just come here, and since this is going to be the splash screen, I'll just have this logo stay here. I would align it to the center horizontally and to the center vertically. Then I would go ahead to create the login screen, the sign up screen, and all of that. And actually, the way I like doing it is this. I like to segment the screens into categories using the user task. This section or this segment should be for authentication screens. So I would go ahead, speed up this process and have other screens here. Then I would explain how I came about all of them. Now, before I do that, I may have missed something here. I know some people who are new to FigJam may not understand how these connectors are created. Now, all you have to do is use the connector tool. Select it, click on the point, then you connect it anyhow you want to connect it. You can take your connector anywhere, connect any shape that you are trying to connect, and that's fine. And when your connector is created, you can actually play around with it. You can click on it to select it, grab that point, take it up, take it down. Anyhow you want to play around with it is fine. Now you can also select the connector and change the color of the connector, just like this. So all of these connection lines were created using the connector tool here. So let's go back to our Figma design file. And I would pause this video here and come back with all of our low fidelity screens. Then I would explain further. So what we have here are low fidelity screens for the authentication task. So let's zoom in. As you can see here, we have the splash screen, which is this. Now after the splash screen, we have this screen where the user will have to choose their authentication action, which is either to log in or to sign up. Now, to create this button here, you don't need to use an auto layout or any of that. All you just have to do is select the rectangle tool like this, create it anyhow you want to create it. Then come here, select the text tool, and you can just say login or sign up or whatever you want to have there, just like this. That's how I created this. And I did not have to come up with a color. And it's advisable for you not to use colors when creating your low fidelity screens. And that's because if you have colors chosen, it may distract the stakeholders when you are presenting the low fidelity screens to them. At this stage, all you should focus on is the user experience. So having colors or making the low fidelity screens look good may distract the stakeholders away from the user experience. So that's how I came up with the buttons there. And here also, these input fields, I just use a rectangle, the rectangle tool to create a rectangle shape there. I added a stroke and I took out the fill color and I had that. Then I had a text inside there saying email, just like that. And this button, we know how to do that. I duplicated all of this and I had one more field here for the phone number, and my button is still here. Then here we have this field for a verification code, and over here I have the verify button. That's okay. So all of these screens here are for the authentication task. Now let's scroll down to the next task, which is going to be the fund wallet task, and that task actually will happen from the home page. So that's why I created a low fidelity version of our home page. So you can see that we don't have too much of information here. So if I scroll down, you'd see that I have the fund account pop-up action here. Now this element is going to show up when a user clicks on fund account here. When they do that, this pop-up will show up for them to choose the method that they want to fund their account with. And that's okay. So this is easy to create. Just have a rectangle like this and have your text inside of it. Then the background of this navigation section is also a rectangle that I had across the screen like this. And I changed the color to something like this, just like that. That's easy. So over here, this is a rectangle also with a text on it. And I have a rectangle here with a corner radius of 16px. And that's okay. Here we know how to create a button, and this is just text. Now for this icon here, I got that from an icon plugin. I used the Feather Icons plugin to have that sorted. So this task is complete. We have the fund account button here, which if a user clicks on it, you would have this pop-up show up like this. Now let's move over to the next task on our app. And the next task here is to invest. So if I come here and I scroll down, you'd see that I have these screens for the invest task. Now this is the section for that. We have this page here, we have this icon, we have this text here. Now I have this section, which is like the list of stocks to invest in. I have this search bar here. I have this search field here, which is also easy to create. All you have to do is create a rectangle, give it a corner radius of, let's say 16, or let's say 8. 16 is a lot. Then come here, take out the fill color and give it a stroke color, and you have that. Then you have a text inside there. That's really easy to create. Then I have the list of stocks here. So I just have a rectangle here also with this text on top of it. So it's also easy to create. All you have to do is just have something like this, then give it a corner radius of 16, then take the color down a bit to this point, then have your text written on top of it, blot away, then keep this here, then have this plus 234% there, or any number that you are okay with. So that's how I created this. And if you scroll down, you would see that we have your stock portfolio section, which has this also. We know how to create this. And over here we have the navigation section, and that's okay. So the next page here, let's zoom out a bit. The next page here is the stock details page. Now, this is us assuming that a user is interested in this stock here. You can see where my mouse cursor is on. So if a user is interested in this stock and the user goes ahead to click on it, this details page will show up for this stock, showing the details of that stock and the company that owns the stock. You would have the company logo here, and you'd have the stock percentage and all of that there. You'd have the interest for that stock, minimum cap, volume, about the company, the valuation rank, and all of that. Then you'd have an invest button here. And I think by now we know how to create all of the elements here. Now, if a user clicks on the invest button, they would go to this page where they would have to enter the amount that they wish to invest in that stocks with. And I believe on this page here, we know how to create all of the elements that we have here. Now, if a user clicks on the next button here, after entering the amount they wish to invest in that stocks with, the user will be taken to the next page here, which is going to display the summary of the investment they're about to make. Over here, they would have the amount that they typed in here, display here, the minimum cap, the interest value, and so many other details, and so many other details that are not listed here. Now, if the user is okay with that, the user clicks on the proceed button, and the next page that the user will be taken to is the success page, indicating that that investment is successful. Now, the user will have the option to click on the back to home button here, and that's that. It means that that task, which is the invest task, has been successful. So for us to properly present low fidelity screens like this for testing and for input and for opinions and for all of that, for us to properly do that, it means that we need to make a prototype of these low fidelity screens so that we can present them properly for testing and for input from the stakeholders. So let's go ahead and let's do that. I would click on the prototype option here. So let's start with the splash screen. So I would click on the splash screen to select it. When the splash screen is selected, you'd have this point here. All you have to do is click on it, hold it, and drag it to the screen of destination. So I would want the users to go from the splash screen to this screen here. Now, when I connect this splash screen to this other screen here, you would see that Figma will bring up this interaction details card for us so that we can set the mode of our interaction. So over here, I have the on-click event, and the action for that on-click event is a navigate to action. So what this means is that when the splash screen is clicked, we are going to navigate to this screen here, which is iPhone 13 Pro Max 2. This is the name here. Actually, it is advisable for you to rename all of your screens. That's the best way to do it. So this practically means when the splash screen is clicked on, navigate to this other screen, which is this one here. Now we have an animation section here that we can set the animation of that transition or the animation of that navigation. So currently it is set to instant. I can come here and set this to smart animate. then set this to ease in and out, and I would set the animation delay time to 800 milliseconds. Just type in 800 there and press the enter key on your keyboard, and Figma will add the milliseconds for you. Now, this animation settings is optional. The most important thing here is that we have set the event and the action that will be triggered by that event. Then we have set the destination frame for that action, and that's okay. So that's sorted. Now I would come here, I would click on this button, and I would say, okay, when a user clicks on this login button, they should go to the login screen, which is this. Now for the interaction details, I'll leave it set like this. This is the setting we had before now. So I'll leave it set like that. Now, for the sign up button, when a user clicks on the sign up button, it means the user is a new user. So I would like that user to be taken to the sign up page, which is this one here. Now, when the user goes to the login page and the user enters their email and their password, it means that they would have to click on the login button. And when they click on the login button, I'd like them to go straight to the home page, which is this. Now, remember, for a user to log in, it means the user is an existing user. Now, when a user selects the sign up option here, it means the user is a new user, and the user will have to enter their email address, phone number, and password, right? Now, when they do that, it means they would have to have their phone number verified first. So when the user clicks on sign up, the user will be taken to the verification code page. And when the user's phone number is verified, the user will then be taken to the home page. And that's fine. So you have seen that we have created the authentication flow. So let's come over here on the home page here. Let's work on the next task. Now, the next task is to fund the account, right? And to fund the account, the user will have to click on the fund account button. Now, when they do that, we are going to want a pop-up to show up on the screen, and that pop-up should show this card here that will require the user to choose the method that they want to fund their account with. Let's come here in our interaction details. Over here, it's an on-click event. That's okay. Now, over here, we have the navigate to option, and that's not what we want. We want a pop-up to show up on that same screen. We don't want the user to leave that page that the user is on. We want the user to still stay on that page, but have a pop-up show up. So how do we make that happen? We are going to change this from navigate to open overlay. When we change it to open overlay, we are going to come here and select the centered option, because I would want this pop-up to stay at the center of the screen, yeah? So over here, I would keep this selected, which is close when clicking outside, and I would also keep this add background behind overlay option selected. Then for the opacity of the background overlay, I would keep it set to 25%. Now for the animation, you can still keep it set to instant, or come here and select any other option of your choice. So that's okay. And we are okay with that. Now, if a user selects bank transfer or debit card, they will be taken to another page where they would have to process that transaction method. So you can also come here, if you don't mind. Let's click on design. You can come here and duplicate this page and create a low fidelity screen for that. You can call this bank transfer, and you can have whichever element you want to have here. And you can go ahead to have the debit card page also that the user will go to when they select the debit card option here. But that's not the point here, so I'll take this out. Now we are done with the fund wallet task. So the next task is the invest task. And this task will happen from the home page. It is when the users go to the home page that they would click on this invest option here for them to go to the invest page so that they can invest in stocks. So from this home page here, I would come here, I would click on prototype. From this home page here, I would select this invest button here, and I would create a connection to this page, and that's okay. So when a user clicks on that invest button at the navigation section there on the home page, that user will be taken to this page here, which is the invest page, where the user will see the list of stocks that they can invest in and their stock portfolio. So if a user comes to this invest page, the task we want them to complete is to invest. So let's say the user is cool with this stock here and the user wishes to invest in this stock. I would select it, then I would create a connection like this. This means that when the user clicks on this stock, the user will go to the stock details page for that stock. And when the user is okay with that stock details that the user sees here, the user will click on the invest button here, and the user will go here to this other page where the user will have to enter the amount that they wish to invest in that stocks with. And when the user enters the amount they wish to invest with, the user will click on the next button, which will take the user to this page here where the user will see a summary of the investment the user is about to make. And when the user is okay with all the user sees here, the user will click on proceed and the investment, which is the task, will be completed. So what we have here is we are done creating our low fidelity screens and we can present our low fidelity screens for testing now. So how do we do that? I would come here, I would select the splash screen because that's where the whole journey starts from, right? When I select it, I would come here and I would click on this present button here to have that presented. A new tab will be launched for that. So I would come here and I would click on the enter full screen option here. You can see where my mouse cursor is on. Now, this is the presentation I would present to the stakeholders, which are my employers or the owners of the app. So I'll take this presentation to them to demonstrate the user experience that I have come up with that will enable the users to accomplish their task on this app. So I would go from here, I would click on this screen and I would explain to the stakeholders at this point that existing users can click on login and new users can click on sign up. So I would demonstrate this as a new user. I would say, okay, when they click on sign up, they would come here, enter their email, phone number, and password. When they click on the sign up button, they would have to enter a verification code. And when they are verified, they would go to the home page. Now, if they want to invest, it means they have to fund their account. So I would click on the fund account button to demonstrate to them that in this case now we have a bank transfer method and a debit card method. I would say, okay, if the users go ahead to fund the account, then it means the users are ready to invest. So for them to invest, they would come down here and click on the invest button there. When the user does that, the user will see a list of stocks that they can invest in. And if the user chooses to invest in any of the stock, let's use this for example, they would click on it. When they click on it, the user will be taken to the stock details page for that stock. And when the user is satisfied with the details of the stock, the user will click on the invest button here. Then the user will be required to enter the amount they wish to invest in that stocks with. When the user does that, the user will click on the next button here. And when the user clicks on that next button, the user will see a summary of the investment they are about to make. And if the user is satisfied, the user clicks on the proceed button here and the investment will be successful. And when the user is done, the user clicks on back to home and the user will be taken back to the home page. So a presentation like this will really reveal the experience that the user will have using this product. So if your low fidelity prototype has been accepted by the stakeholders, it means that it is now time for you to go ahead and start the process of designing your high fidelity prototype, which is going to be like the real design version of your app or the final design version of your app. And it is at that stage that you would focus on things like colors, typography, effects, components library, style library, and all of that. So in this course, let's assume that our stakeholders gave us a pass for these low fidelity screens, and they are okay with it. Let's assume that our stakeholders now want us to go ahead to design the real version of the app. So what do? Let's click on design, come here, create a new page, and call this high fidelity. So at this stage, I would like to welcome everyone to the most interesting part, which is the part where we start building our designs from scratch. So first things first, I would go ahead to create my style library, and I would start by creating my typography styles. So I would do that using the Material Design version 2 guide. So I would come over here, I would go to material.io, and when I come here, I would click on design. When I click on design, I would come here on the left side and I would click on typography. Then I would select the type system. And when I do that, I would come here. So the first thing that I would have set is the typeface or font family that I want to use for this project. For this project, I would love to use the Rubik font family. So I would come here and I would select it here for headlines and subtitles. Then I would go ahead to select it here for body and captions, just like that. Now I would use the data here in this type scale to create my typography styles. Now let's start with creating headline text styles for this project. Now, since this is a mobile app project, I won't see the need to have a headline 1 text. Same for the headline 2 text. So I would go with the headline 4 text style as my own headline 1 text style, just because this is a mobile app design and this size of text is going to look too big for a mobile app. So I would come here, I would click on headline 4 and I would use these details here. So I would come here, I would create a frame here where my text styles are going to stay in. So I would say headline 1, I'll duplicate this. I would say headline 1 bold. So I would say headline 2. Now this is me getting everything set before I start applying the details that I would get here from the type scale generator. So I would come here, I would duplicate this and I would say headline 2 bold, and I would come here, I would have this here, I would say headline 3, and this is going to be headline 3 bold, and that's going to be that for my headline text styles for this project. Now I would go ahead to have my body text styles. So I would come here, I would prepare this for body large, and I would have this be a body large bold text style. Then I would go with body small here, and I would have this as body small bold. Now this is my own style and this is my own pattern. I am not saying this is the standard out there. I'm just doing this because this is what I feel will give me the best design. And I would come here. This will be for my button text and I would have a caption text. So after having all of this set, I would come here, I would select the headline 1 text here, and I would use the headline 4 text style here in Material Design. Just like I said, I would use this for my headline 1 text style. So the font family is set to Rubik, the weight is set to normal, which is regular, the size is set to 35, and the letter spacing is set to 0.25 px. So I would go ahead and I would have all of this set. So I would come here, keep this selected, I would set this to Rubik, and I would set this to regular. And for the letter spacing, I would come here and I would set this to 0.25 px. And for the size, I would set it to 35 px. Now, I would use these same settings for this headline 1 text, for the headline 1 bold text. The only difference will be that this is going to be a bold text and this is going to be a regular text. So I would select this and I would set this to 35. I would set this to Rubik and I would keep it set to bold like I said. And I would make this 0.25 px, and that's okay. So I would go ahead and I would do same for headline 2, headline 3, body large bold, down to the caption text. Now for the headline 2 text here, I would come here in Material Design and I would use the headline 5 text style for my own headline 2 text style. So the font family is Rubik, the weight is normal, the size is 24. So I would set the size to 24, and for the weight I would keep it set to regular, and for the font family I would keep it set to Rubik. Now the letter spacing is 0px, so I can just keep it set as 0%, or just come in here and type in 0px, and that's fine. I would use the same setting for the headline to bold, but the difference will be that this is going to be a bold text. So I would come here, I would set this to 24, set this to Rubik, keep this set to 0, keep the letter spacing set to 0, and then keep this set to bold, so I can have that. Now for my headline 3 text, if I come here, I would use the headline 6 text style here for my own headline 3 text. So I would keep this set to Rubik, this set to medium, the size set to 20. So I'll keep the size set to 20, and for this I'll keep it set to medium, and I would set this to Rubik. Then for the letter spacing, it's set to 0.15px. So I would come here, I would say 0.15px, and that's going to be cool. Then for the headline 3 bold, I would have the same settings there, but the only difference as usual will be that this is going to be a bold text. So I would come in here, I would set this to Rubik, keep that set to bold, and for the size I think it's 20px, and for the letter spacing is 0.15px. So I'll type that in, and I would keep this set to 20, just like this, and that's okay. So for the body large text, come here and use the body 1 text style here. You can see that the size is 16px, the weight is normal, and the letter spacing is 0.5px. So I would come here, I would keep this here, I would set the letter spacing to 0.5px, I would set the weight to regular, and I would set this to 16, and I would set this to Rubik, and that's okay. For the body large bold, you know what to do already. I would set this to 16, set this to 0.5px, set this to bold, then set this to Rubik, and that's it. So I would go ahead and I would have my body small text here, and if I come here in material design, I would use the body 2 text style here in material design for that. So I would keep it set to normal, set the size to 14, and the letter spacing to 0.25px. So I would have this set to 0.25px. I would set this to 14. I would set this to Rubik, and I would set this to regular. So I would have this here, and this is going to be 14, 0.25, and this is going to be Rubik, and that's sorted. Now for the button text, I would keep this here. If you come here, you would see that the button text here has a size of 14px and a letter spacing value of 1.25px with a weight that is set to medium. Now, over here in Material Design 2, the button text is all in uppercase, but in my case, I won't have my text stay in uppercase. And I think in Material Design version 3, the button text is not represented in uppercase. So I would go ahead and I would have this set to 14, and the letter spacing is pretty big, so I would have that set to 1.25px, and this will be set to medium with the font family set to Rubik, and that's what we have here. Now for the caption text, it's going to be set to 12px with a letter spacing value of 0.4px and a normal weight. So I would come here, I would keep this here, and I would have this set to regular. This will be 0.4px, and this will be set to 12, just like this, and the font family will be set to Rubik. So this is going to be our caption text. So at this stage, what I'll do is I'll go ahead to save all of these styles that I have created to my style library, and I think we all know how to do that by now. So I would speed this process up. I would select this, come here, and I would call this headline 1. I would go ahead, fast forward this part of the course and come back. So this is it. I have created and saved the text style that I would need for this project. So I would come here and I would rename this frame typography styles, just for better documentation, you know. Now when I click on my empty canvas, you would see that I have all of my saved text styles over here. Now let's go ahead and let's create our color styles. I would rename this frame to color styles. I'd save that. Now I would create my color styles based on my need. I won't make use of the material design guide to create my color styles. And that's because you can actually do that. You can create your color styles, your text styles. You can create any of your styles without using the material design guide, and you can actually mix it. You can create your text styles with the material design guide and have your color styles created from your own inspiration. So I would come here. I'd like to have a background color here. So I would use this for my background color. I would have a text stay at the top here to indicate that this is for my background color. I would select this text and I would make use of one of my saved text styles. So I would go with the body large text there. So for my background color style, I would like to use this color, and that's good. Let's zoom into this point so we can see clearly. And after having a background color, I would duplicate this, use this here. I would love to have a surface color. And for my surface color, I would like it to be this color here. You can use any color of your choice. This is my own choice. So I would duplicate this. I'd have this stay here. And this time I would like to have a surface text color. You can call this an on-surface color actually. So I would like to have a surface text color, which is going to be the color that I would use to write text on this surface color. So I'd like this to be white actually. I know this may not be visible, but I'd like that to be white just like that. So I would duplicate this. Now for us to make this visible, I would select it and I would add a shadow effect. The next color that I would have here we called the off text color, and that's my own choice. I'd like to have another color for my text. So I would use this shade for my off text color, and I'll duplicate this and I would have another color here, which is going to be my error color. And obviously this is going to be a red color. So I would use this shade of red for that. Then I would have this here, and I would like to have a second surface color, and I would like that color to be just like this, and that's fine. So I have selected all of the color styles that I would want for this project. So I would go ahead and I would save all of these styles to my style library, and I think we all know how to do that. So I would select this, come here, and I would call that background color. I would speed up this process and I would come back to it. So as you can see, I am done creating and saving my color styles, and these are my color styles here. So that's sorted. The next thing I'd like us to do is to go ahead and create the grid style that we are going to use for this project. So to do that, I would use a mobile layout. I would use the iPhone 13 Pro Max layout. So I would have the iPhone 13 Pro Max layout here. I would rename it to mobile grid style. I would zoom in to this point. I would keep it selected. Then I would add a layout grid property to it, just like that. Then I would have this be a column grid, and I would have the count be 4. I would have the margin be 16. I would have the gutter be 16. And for the color, I would go with something like this. Now, we are sorted for the column grid. So I would go ahead and I would add a row grid property to it. I would keep it selected still, come here, and I would add another grid property that I would set as a row grid property, just like this. I would set the count to 800, and I would set the stretch to center. I would set the gutter property to 0. I would come here, I would set the height property to 8, and that's because I want the space between the row lines to be 8 px. Then I would come here and I would change the color to something like this, and that's going to be okay for me. So I would keep this selected, come here, and I would save this grid style as my grid style for this project. So I would click on style there, and I would call this mobile grid style. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Now we have 3 styles saved to our style library. We have our text styles, we have our color styles, and we have our grid styles. So I would like for us to go ahead and create shadow styles for this project. So to do that, I would come here, I would have a frame here, then I would rename this to shadow styles. When I rename that to shadow styles, I would have some rectangles right inside that frame, and the rectangle is just to display the shadow effect and how it's going to look like. So I would keep that selected. I would make the corner radius to have a value of 8. I would give it this color, and I would duplicate this, and I'd have this here. I would just have 3 shadow effect styles. So I would keep that there, and I would come here in material design, and I would go to the home page. I would click on the search icon there, and I would type in shadow. When I press the enter key, I would have these results show up. So I would come here, I would click on this link here. That's going to take me to Material Design version 1, where I would make use of the recommendations that they have there for creating shadow styles. So I would click on that link, and I would come here, and I would use these shadow recommendations that's under the sketch section. So I won't go with the 1 dp elevation table here. I would scroll down, and I would make use of the 16 dp elevation table. So I would use these values here to create my shadow styles. So I would create a key shadow and an ambient shadow. Now under the key shadow, you can see that we have 2 types of key shadow styles. We have the umbra key shadow style and the penumbra key shadow style. So I would create an umbra key shadow style first. And for that, the opacity value is set to 14. So I would come here, I would keep this selected. I would add an effect property, and I would set the opacity value here to 14. And the X property is set to 0 with the Y property set to 16. So I would come here for the Y property, I would set this to 16. The X property here is already set to 0. Now the blur property is 24 and the spread property is 2. So for the blur property, I would set it to 24, and for the spread property, I would set it to 2. And here we have our umbra key shadow effect. So I would go ahead and I would create for the penumbra key shadow effect and the ambient shadow effect. So I would speed up this process also, and I would come back when I'm done. So these are the shadow styles that I have created. So I would go ahead and I would save them to my style library. The way to do that is pretty easy. Select this rectangle there, then come here in the effect section, click on that style icon there, and you can call this whatever you want to call it. I would call this light shadow. I would call this other one here mid shadow, and I would call this thick shadow, and that's okay. So far, I have my text styles created, I have my color styles created, I have my effect styles created, and I have my grid styles created. Now at this stage, we are ready to start designing the components for our app. So I would like us to go ahead and start that. So the method I would like to use in the designing of our component will go like this. I would like for us to design our components based on the user task of this app. Now, the first task I would like us to look at is the authentication task. So for this task, I'd like us to design all of the components that will be needed to complete this task. So let's come up here. Let's have a text here. I would zoom into 200 and I would have a text here. This is going to be the section where I would have all of my authentication components. So I would come here, I would select this text style to have that there. So for the authentication task, we have the login form and the sign up form. So for the login form, which components do we have there? We have the input field and we have the button. So I would go ahead to design the input field. So I would come here, I would just say inputs. Now this is going to be my placeholder. So I would come here and I would use the body small text for that. And I would keep it selected, then create an auto layout on it. Now when I create an auto layout on it, I would add a fill color like this. Then I would just stretch it to this point. Now I would still keep this auto layout selected. Come here and make sure that the content of the auto layout is aligned to the left. And that's fine. Now for the corner radius property, I would give it a corner radius value of 8 to have that. Now I would come here and I would rename this to input field. Now while this is here, I would select the background color for the input field itself. Then the text here, I would give it this off text color here. And I'd like this input field to have a stroke color, which is going to be the color of the off text also. So I can have this. Now, this is sorted. We are done with creating our input field. This input field is what we are going to reuse for the collection of emails, passwords, phone numbers. So I would go ahead, keep it selected, and I would come here and I would click on create component. Now, the next thing to create will be our button component. So I would come here and I would have this text here. And for that text, I would come here and I would select the button text for that. Now I would keep the text selected and I would create an auto layout on the text. Now I would come here for the button auto layout. I would make sure the padding around items value is set to 16. Now same happened for this. The padding around items value for this input field is also 16. So take note of that. Now for this button component, I would come here and I would give it this color, which is the surface color. Now for the text there, I would come here and I would give it the surface text color, which is white. Now I would come here, I would select the button auto layout, come here and I would align the content of that auto layout to stay at the center. Still keep it selected, come here and give it a corner radius of 8. And there we have our button component created. So I would come here, I would rename this to button. Then come here and click on create component. And there we have created our button component. Now, the next component I would like for us to create here under the authentication task will be the input field that the users will have to input their verification code in. Now, that input field will not look like this. It's going to look different. So I'd like for us to go ahead and do that. So I would come here, I would have a text here. Let's just say 0. And I would keep that number selected. Then go ahead and create an auto layout on that number. Now I would keep the auto layout I just created selected, come here, and I would align the content of the auto layout to stay at the center of the auto layout. Then I would come here and I would add a fill color to that auto layout. Now I would come here, I would select the pen tool and I would just draw a line horizontally. Then I would click on done, and this line I just created here will be grabbed and taken into that auto layout that has that number 0. And you can see that that line is placed here. Now, what I would do is this. I would come here inside this auto layout now. I would select this straight line that I created, which is called vector 1 here. When I select it, I would come here and I would change its horizontal resizing value from fixed width to fill container so that I can have that. Now, I have a problem here. The padding around value for this auto layout is really big. So I would select the auto layout. I would come here and I would set it to 8. When I set it to 8, it's going to look like this. Now, I'd like it to be like this because if I am placing these components on my screen, I would most likely increase the width. And as you can see, when I increase the width, the number 0 just stays the way it is, but the line itself stretches across the container, which is actually what I want. So this is okay now. Now, since the verification code will be a 4-digit verification code, I'd like to have this component go into 4 places. I would go ahead and I would do that. So I would keep this component selected and I would create another auto layout on top of it like this. Now, this auto layout that I just created is called frame 2. I would keep it selected, come here and I would set its direction property to horizontal direction. When I set that to horizontal direction, I would come here and I would set the padding around items value to 0. Just like that. Now I would come here and I would expand the frame 2 auto layout now, just so that I can access the frame 1 auto layout inside of it. Now when I select that frame 1 auto layout inside of it, I'll duplicate it. And you can see that I have duplicated this into 4 places. Now I would come back here, I would select the frame 2 auto layout and I would set the spacing between items value to 0. Just to have this. Now let's check to see if this auto layout itself is a responsive auto layout. So I would keep it selected still and I would come here and I would try to expand it. And as you can see, if I expand it horizontally, the layout itself is not responding to that expansion. So I would Control Z to go back to how we were before. And at this stage, what I'm going to do is this. I would select the individual sub auto layout inside this main auto layout. I would select this one, which is frame 1. I would come here and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. And I'll do that for all of them, just like that. Now, when I select the frame 2 auto layout now and I increase the size horizontally, you would see that it's all responsive. And that's what I want. So I would keep this here. I would rename this to verification input. Keep it selected, come here and click on create component, and that's sorted. So at this stage, I'd like for us to go ahead and create our authentication screens. So let's create a section for that, not a page actually. I would say authentication screens, authentication hi-fi screens, just like this. So I would come here, I would have an iPhone 13 Pro Max screen here, and I would rename this. Make sure you rename your layout at this stage. So I would rename this to splash, and we all know what the splash screen is, yeah? That's the screen you see when you launch an app. So I would come here, I would change the color of the splash screen to this. And on the splash screen, I would like for us to have the logo of the brand. And the logo of this brand is really easy. It's just VXST, just like that. So I would keep the text selected. I would come here and I would go with the headline too bold, and I would work with this. So I would keep that text selected, come here and align it horizontally and align it vertically, and that's okay. So this is our splash screen. So after the splash screen, the next screen to create will be the screen where the user will have to select their authentication action. So I'll duplicate this splash screen. I'll take this out and I'll change the color of this screen now to this. Then come here and rename it auth selection. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Now over here, I would bring in the button component. I would go to my assets panel. I would bring this in and I would align it to the center horizontally, and I would expand it to this point. Now for me to expand it properly, I would need to apply my grid style on this layout. So I would come here and I would apply my mobile grid style here so that I can use this as my guide to properly expand this button. So I'd like the button to take up 2 column grids, and that's what I have here. So I would come here, I would change the text to login, and I would bring in another button component here, and I'll change this to get started. Now I would come here, select this button component and change its color to this, just to make it different. So I would keep this here and I would keep this here, and that's fine. So I would select this and I would align it to the center vertically, and I would bring this and I would place this get started button right under this login button, but I would use the row grid to ascertain the space value I would give to that. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 rows here, and 8 into 4 places is 32. So I have a 32px bottom margin space between this login button and the get started button. Now I think the row grid is not really visible, so I would come here, I would go to my row grid saved style, I would click on edit style, I would select rows and I would increase the opacity of that color to 20. So this is sorted. This screen is sorted. Now, if the user goes ahead to click on the login button here, it means the user will go to the login page, right? So I would create that now. So let's zoom in. Let's take this out and let's click on layers and change the name of this frame to login page. And what I'll do is this. When I zoom in, I'll bring this here. So what I'll do is I would just have logo stay here. I would come here and I would select headline 2 bold. That's too big. I would go with headline 3 bold. That's okay. So I would align it to stay at the center horizontally and I'll bring it down to this point. Then I'll change the color to this. Now what I'll do next is to have my login form created, and I'll do that with my input field here, which is this. Now I'd like this input field to stretch from here to here, just like that. Now this input field would have a label here. So I would just give it a label here that says enter email address. I would keep label here. Now the space between this label and this input field is 16px. I have 2 row spaces between this label text and this input field. Now for the input field, I'll change the placeholder text from input to enter email address. And that's okay. So I would come here, I would have another input field here, which is going to be used for the password. So I would change the placeholder here to enter password, and I'll give this input field its own label. I'll duplicate this, and first of all, I would say, okay, the space between this input field and this label text should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 8 times 6 is 48. So I would like a 48px margin space between this input field and this label text. So that's sorted. Now I'd like a 16px space between this label text and this input field. So I would come here and I would edit this from enter email address to enter password. That's okay. Let's align this properly. So the next thing I would have here is the login button. So I'll bring a button component here. And for this button component, I'd like to have a margin space here of 32px. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll bring this here, place this there, and let's zoom out. Let's stretch this to this point and stretch this to this point. Then I'll change the text of the button to login. Let's see how it looks. Okay, this doesn't look really good. The spacing is not really consistent. So I would zoom out and I would have the space between this label text and this input field to be 32px actually. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So I would have that stay there and I would have this stay here. Then I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is 48px. So let's see how it looks. So this looks okay. Now I'd like us to have a text here, which is going to be the forgot password text. Forgot password. So let's keep this here. And let's have that stay 16px away from this input field and 16px away from this button component. So I would select the text and I would make sure it is a body small text. And that's okay. So I would zoom out. You can see that we have that. So I would go ahead and I would create the sign up page for our authentication task. So I would come here, I would click on layers and I would rename this to sign up page. And if you come here, the only difference we are going to have here is the fact that we are going to have an additional input field to collect the user's phone number. So this means that I'll take this out for now, and I would have another placeholder here, which is going to have a margin top space of 32px, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll bring this here. And I would bring in an input field, which is going to stay here. Then I would stretch the input field to this point. Now I would use this second input field to collect the user's phone number. And I'll change the placeholder here to phone number. Then I would use this third input field to collect the user's password, just like that. Now I would go ahead and I'll bring in a button here. And this button is going to have a 48px margin top space. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'll bring this here and I'll change the text here to sign up. So I would zoom out. I would keep this selected. I would stretch this to this point and I would stretch this to this point. And that's sorted. So we have created our login screen and our sign up screen. Now, when the users click on the sign up button here, the users will be taken to that page where they would have to enter the verification code that was sent to their phone number. So we are going to go ahead to create that page. So I would come here and I would rename this verification page and I'll take all of this out. Over here, after the logo, I would have a rectangle that's going to be this big. I'd like the rectangle to be a 48px tall rectangle, just like this. I would zoom out, I would have this here, and I would stretch the rectangle to this point. And I would have the rectangle have this background color. Now on this rectangle, I would have a text that says a verification code has been sent to, just like that. So I would keep this text here and I would use a body small text for that. Then I would align the text to the center horizontally. Then I would keep this text aligned to the horizontal center of the page, just to stay like this. And that's okay. And that's okay. So I would go ahead and I would bring in that input component for the verification code. But before I do that, let's change the color of this text. So I would come here and I'll give it this color. Then I would click on the assets panel now and I'll bring in this component. Now for this component, I would keep it selected. First things first, I would change the color of that component. I would select the individual items inside the component and I'll change this to the background color that we have, just like this. And that's okay. Now for the lines that we have, I'll change the color of all those lines to this. And for the numbers, I'll change the color of the numbers to this. And that's okay. So I would keep this selected. I would increase the width to this point. So let's zoom in so that we can organize this properly. So I would keep this here and I would snap the height to this point, just like this. So I would have a placeholder text there that's going to say enter verification code, just like this. And I'll change the color of that text to this. So let's go ahead and let's change the color of this label text that we have here to this. Change this to this. Come here, change this to this, and change this to this. Now for the enter password text here, I'll change it to this also. And for the forgot password text, I'll change it to this. And that's okay. Now let's go back to our verification code page and let's have this button come up to this point. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll keep this here. And I'll just have a verify text there, just like that. So at this stage, we have created our verification page for our authentication task. Now, when the users click on the verify button, we are going to need a pop-up that would show up on the screen to let the users know that their verification has been successful. Now, how do we create that pop-up? It's simple. I would come here, I would select the frame tool, and I would create a pop-up just like this. Now, the reason I am creating this here is so that I can use the width of this layout to set the width of this pop-up. Now, the definite way to do this is this. If you come here and you select this page, you would see that the width is 428. Now, the margin space on this layout is 16 here and 16 here, which is 32, right? So to get the container space here and use the width of the container space for this my pop-up would be me subtracting 32 from 428. So I would just select this. I would come here, I would say 428 minus 32, and that's going to be the width for my pop-up. And this is it. As easy as that. So I would come here and I would give it a corner radius of 8. Then I would go ahead and I would give it this background color. When I give it this background color, then I would have a text right inside that layout that's going to say phone number verified or whatever you want to say. So I would come here and I would select a better text style for that. I would go with the body large text style, just like this. I would align it to the center horizontally. Now I would bring in the button component here and I would have a proceed button here that the user will click on to go to the home page. And we are done creating this. So I would select this, go to the layers tab, and I would call this verify pop-up, just like that. So that pop-up is going to show up when the user enters their verification code here and click on the verify button. So I would grab this now and I'll place it here. And that's fine. So at this stage, I would like to say that we are done with creating all of the screens that we need for our authentication task. So this is going to take us to the next task of our app. And that task is actually the fund task, where the users will have to fund their wallet or their accounts so that they can invest. So I would come here and I would have this here. I would change this to fund account. So all of the components that I would have here will be the components that will aid the user to fund their account on this app. So let's go ahead and let's do that. Now, what you need to take note of is this. For a user to fund their account, the user will have to go to the home page of the app first, right? Because it is from the home page that they would see the fund account button. So what does this mean? This means that we need to create components for the homepage and have our homepage sorted first before we handle the fund account route. So let's go ahead and let's do that. On the homepage, the first component that we are going to have will be a card component that will display the balance that we have in our account. And it is still on that card component that we are going to have the fund account button. So let's go ahead and let's create that. So I would have a text here. It's going to say primary account. I would keep that text selected and I would set the typography style to body small bold Now let's zoom into 200. So this is it. Now I would come here and I would create another text, which is going to be like the account number or the account ID. So I would say this, and I would keep that selected also. Now I would set this to body small. So now I would select both of these and I would create an auto layout on the both of them. Now when that auto layout is created, I would make sure that the padding around items value is set to 0 for now. Now I would come here, I would select this text and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. I would select this here and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. And for the height, I would come here and I would set the height property here to auto height to make it balanced. Now we have this created. So I would come here, I would add a fill color to this. Now I'll duplicate this, I'll bring this here and I'll change this text to account balance, or let's just say available balance. Actually, let's not say account balance, I would say available balance, and here I'll write down the available balance, and that's fine. So I would keep this here also. Now what I'll do is I would select these two auto layouts and I would add an auto layout on the both of them. For this new auto layout that I have created, I would come here and I would set the spacing between items value to 24. And I would select this auto layout that's inside this new auto layout and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. And I'll do that for this also. Now I would select this new auto layout and I would add a fill color of white to it to have this. Now you can see that this is actually responsive, and that's okay. Now I'd like to bring in a button component and place it inside this auto layout so that that button will be used for the fund account action. So I would come here, I would bring in a button component here, then I would select that button component in the design tree here, hold it and grab it into this frame 7 auto layout, which is our auto layout. And you can see that the button component is placed inside this auto layout. Now I would like this button component to look different. So I would keep it selected, come here and I would set its top padding value to 8 and its bottom padding value to 8 so I can have this. Now I'll change this text to fund account just like this, and that's okay. Now I would go to the feather icons plugin and I'll look for an icon that I would place on the right side to make that component just look better. Let's come in here, let's just type in home. I'll bring this in actually. I'll bring this here and I'll place it here. Now I would select all of these and I would create an auto layout on all of them. Now a new auto layout called frame 8 has been created. Now inside this frame 8 auto layout, we have this auto layout here and this icon. So I would select this auto layout now that's inside the frame 8 auto layout and I would set the value for its horizontal resizing property to fill container, and I'll leave this set to fixed width. Now I would select the frame 8 auto layout now, which is our main auto layout now, and I would come here and I would set the spacing between items value to 24. When I do that, I would come here and I would add a fill color to this, and I would add a fill color to the auto layout to have this. And the final thing I would do here is to come here and set the padding around items value to 16. When that's done, I would give it a corner radius of 8 to have this. Now I can expand this to this point like this, and you can see that this component is responsive. And that's that. So let's go ahead and let's play around with the colors of the elements on this component. So I would select this text here and I would give it this color. I would select this and I would give it this color. Do same for this and do same for this. Then for this, I would select the icon itself, and that's fine. So I would rename this to balance card or whatever you want to call it. I would keep it selected and I would click on create component. And here we have our components created. So on the home page still, I'd like to display a list of recent transactions that's been carried out on the app. So let's go ahead and let's create a component that's going to serve that purpose. So I would come here, I would create a text. I would call that deposit. Come here and I would select the body large bold text. Then I would come here and I would create another text and I would have this, which is going to be a date that the deposit happened. So I would select these two texts and I would create an auto layout on the both of them. Now I would select this text inside the auto layout and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. And I'll do that for this also. Now I would select the auto layout and I would set its spacing between items value to 4. And that's okay. Now for this deposit text, I would change the color to this. And for the date here, I'll change its color to this. And that's okay. So I would keep this here. And the next thing I'll do is to have a frame here that's going to be 48 by 48. I would keep it selected and I would give it a corner radius of 100 to make it round. Then I would go to the feather icons plugin and I would have an icon there that signifies incoming, which is this. I would select this icon now and I would place it on top of this 48 by 48 px frame that I created. When I place it there, I would come here and I would set its constraint value to center for the horizontal axis and center for the vertical axis, and that's okay. Now I would select this frame, which is now a circle, and I would set its color. Let's set it to green like this. And for the icon, I would set its color to this, and that's okay. Now for this frame now that I have created, I'll bring it and I'll place it here. And I would select all of this and I would create an auto layout on the both of them. Now for this new auto layout, I would come here and I would set its spacing between items value to 16. And I would come here and I would set its alignment value to the center, just like this. Now I would keep it selected still, come here and add a fill color to it, just like this. Now I would come here now and I would create this text. And this text is going to be a body large bold text. Now I would come here and I would create another text, which is going to just like display the balance. I would keep that selected and I would make it a caption text, just like this. Now I would select both of them, create an auto layout on the both of them and set the spacing between items value to 4. Now I would select the text inside the auto layout now and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container to have that. And that's sorted. So I would select this now and I would give it a fill color of white. Now for the color of the text, I would set this to something light like this, and this will be something like that. Now what I would do is I would select all of this and I would create an auto layout on all of them. First things first, I would align the content of the auto layout to stay at the center. Then I would add a fill color to the auto layout to have this. Now for the spacing between items value of this new auto layout now, I'd like to set it to 76, and that's okay. Now for the padding around items value, I'd like to set this to 8, and that's okay. Now let's check to see if this auto layout is responsive. As you can see, it's not. So let's sort that out, and to sort it out is really easy. I would select this frame here, this auto layout here. I would select this auto layout here and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. Now when I set this to fill container, I would select the auto layout that's inside it, which is frame 8, and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container also. Now I would make sure all of this is set to fill container, so I would select the items to be sure that they are also set to fill container. Now when I select the frame 12 now, which is our major frame, you would see that this is now responsive. And that's okay. So I would keep it selected, come here and I would set the corner radius value to 8. And I have this. I'd like to duplicate this to have a withdrawal component where this circle is going to be red and the icon is going to be different. So I would set the position of this icon to, let's set it to 180. That's the angle position. That's what I am setting here. Or you can call it the rotation property of that icon. So I'm setting it to 180 degrees. And I'll change this withdrawal. Then you can change all of these details if you want to change them. I would select the circle itself, which is this frame, and I'll change the color to this. And that's okay. So I would come here, I would select this, I would rename this to withdrawal card, keep it selected, make it a component. Okay, that's supposed to be deposit card. So I would select this, come here, and I would rename this to deposit card. Keep it selected, come here and click on create component. Then select this, rename this to withdrawal card. Keep it selected and make it a component. And that's sorted. Still on the home page, we are going to have a banner that will be used to copy referral links. So I would go ahead and I would create that. So I would have this text here that's going to say invite your friends. I would keep that selected and I would go with this text style here, which is the body large bold text style. And I would have another text here that's going to be invite your friends with the Spark code. And I would go with the caption text style here. And that's cool. So I would select this. When I select it, I would create an auto layout. And I would come here, I would set the spacing between items value to 8. Then I would select the text items inside this auto layout and I would set this to fill container. And I'll do that for this also. Now the next thing I would like to do is to have a frame layout here that's going to be 48 by 48. And I would keep it selected still. I would give it a corner radius value of 100. Then come here and give it that color. Now I would go over to the feather icons plugin and I would look for an icon I can use on that. So I would like to use this icon here. I would select it. I'll bring it here and place it on this frame layout. Now when I place it there, I would make sure it's at the center. Then I would come here and I would set its horizontal constraint value to center and its vertical constraint value to center. And that's okay. Now I would select that icon. Then I would set its color to this. And that's okay. Now I would select all of this, create an auto layout on it. So I would come here and I would align the content of that auto layout to always stay at the center. Now I would keep this auto layout selected and I would give it a fill color, which is going to be the background color like this. Now I would select this auto layout that is inside this main auto layout. Now as you can see, it's the frame 12 auto layout that has this text. When I select it, I would come here and I would set this to fill container. And when I select the main auto layout now, you'd see that this is a responsive auto layout, which means we are good to go. Now for the spacing between items value of this auto layout, I'd like to set it to 24. And for the padding around items value, I'd like to set it to 16 to have that. Then come here and set the corner radius value to 8. And here we have our component. So I would keep this selected now, rename this to referral banner. Then come here and click on create component to make it a component. And that's okay. Now on our home page, we have one final component, which is going to be a very interesting component to create. And that's going to be the navigation component on our home page, which is going to be at the bottom. So let's see how we can create that component before we put our home page screen together. So I would come here and I would get the home icon from the feather icons plugin. I'll type in home there. I'll bring this in. Now I'd like to zoom in at this point so that you can see clearly. When I place this icon here, I would come here and I would create a text and I would call that home. Now for this home text, I would create an auto layout on it and I would set the padding around items value for that auto layout to 0. Then set its alignment position to the center. Now I would select the home text that is inside this auto layout and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. Now I would keep this text auto layout here. Then I would select the home icon and that text auto layout and I would create an auto layout on the both of them. Now this auto layout is frame 15. What I would do now is I would come here and I would set the spacing between items value for this auto layout to 4. When I do that, I would come here and I would set the alignment of the content in that auto layout to always be at the center. Now I would come here and I would select the home auto layout and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. And that's okay. Just stretch this and it's going to be sorted. Now at this stage, what I would do is this. I would have a frame layout here that's going to be 48 by 48. And I would grab this frame 15 auto layout now, and I would place it on this 48 by 48 px frame layout. Make sure it's at the center. When I place it at the center, I would select the frame 16 frame layout, which is our 48 by 48 layout now, and I would make it an auto layout. Now, when I make it an auto layout, I'll bring it here and I would rename this to home link. Now, after I rename it to home link, I would come here and I would set its alignment to the center so that the content of that auto layout will always be at the center. Now, the padding top value is set to 3. I would set it to 4 just so that we are going to have even numbers all around. I would set this to 4 also, and this I would set to 4, and this I would set to 4 just to have this. So at this stage, what I'd like to do now is to have other navigation links. So I would keep this home link auto layout selected and I would create another auto layout on top of it. Now this auto layout that I just created has a padding around items value of 16, yeah? I'll leave it set to 16 because actually that's what it's supposed to be. Now I would come here, I would expand this new auto layout and I would select the home link auto layout and I'll duplicate it like this into 3 places. And that's because I want to have just 3 items there. Now I would come here, I would change this from home to invest, and I'll change this from home to transact. Let's select our frame 16 and let's add a fill color to it to have this. So if I expand the frame 16, you'd see that the icon and the text is just there. It's not responsive. So I'd like to change that. So to change that, I would select this home link, set this to fill container, select this, do that also, select this and do that also. Now, when I select frame 16 and I increase the width horizontally, you would see that this text wrapping to the next line is actually fixed. So for these icons, let's go ahead and let's change this icon to a better icon and this to a better icon. So I would come here, I would go to the feather icons plugin and I would like to have this icon. So I would bring this here and I would come in here and I would trace the auto layout that has that. You can see it's still called home link. I would change that to invest link. When I change it to invest link, you would see that we have the home icon inside here. So I would come here now, I would select this bar chart icon now, and I'll take it inside the invest link auto layout. And I'll place it right inside here. And you can see that it is here at the bottom. So I would select the home icon and I would delete it with the delete key on my keyboard. Then come here, grab this invest icon, hold it and take it upwards like this. So I would go ahead and I would do same for the transact link here. So I would keep this selected, come here, I would rename this to bottom navigation, keep it selected and click on create component, and that component has been created. So at this stage, we can go ahead to make use of all of these components in designing our home page. So to design our home page, I would come here, I would select the frame tool and I would bring in an iPhone 13 Pro Max frame here and I would zoom into this point. Now I would select this iPhone 13 Pro Max frame, rename this to home. When I do that, I would come here and I would apply the grid style on it. And when I do that, let's zoom into 200. I would go ahead and I would bring in the menu icon using the feather icons plugin. So I would use that one there. Now, whenever you bring in an icon and you want to place it into a layout, make sure the icon is inside that layout here in the design tree. As you can see currently, this icon, which is align justify, is not placed inside this layout, which is our home page. So what I would do is I would come here in the design tree, click on it to select it, hold it and drag it into the home layout. And as you can see, it is now inside the home layout. So I would come here and I would place this here. So I would count 8 row spaces from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that's okay. So I would have a text here. So I can come here and I can say hi and for Folake. Now I would like to call your attention to something important. And that is the fact that, as you can see here, I have the name of the user written here, which is Anne Folake. Now, the question you should ask is this: how did I arrive at displaying the name of the user here when in the sign up form, I did not collect the name of the user? If you remember, in my sign up form, I only collected the email address, the phone number, and the password of the user, which means that the app itself does not have a record of the name of the user. So the question you'd ask, which is normal, is how did I arrive at displaying the name of the user here? Now, this is going to be your first assignment in this course, because I'd like you to come here in the authentication section here and refactor the authentication flow here to collect the name of any user that's signing up to this app. Now, I would leave this open without giving you a guide on how to do that. I would like to see your thought process on how to refactor this authentication process with the best experience, and also with the fact that you would collect the name of any user signing up to this application. If you think coming here and adding another field for the name collection is fine, go ahead and do that. If you have another idea that can make the experience better, go ahead and implement that. Now, when you implement the name collection in the authentication task here, go ahead, tag me on social media for my comment. That's your first assignment in this course. Then I can have another text here, and I'll bring this here. Now, the next thing I would like to have here is the balance card. So I would come here in the assets panel and I would bring this component in like this. Now, I'd like to have 4 row spaces between this text and the balance card. But before I do that, I'd like to keep this balance card selected, then come here and apply my shadow style that I saved to it. So I would go with the mid shadow like this. Now let's zoom into this point and let's make sure we have 4 row spaces. And that's okay. Let's zoom out. Now what we are going to do is to stretch this to this point. And that's going to be successful because our component is a responsive component. So nothing is going to break. And this is okay. So I would come here at the bottom here. I would snap this to this row line, and that's sorted. So the next thing I'm going to have here is a text that's going to say recent transactions. I would keep that selected and I would go with a body large bold text. So I would make sure I have 1, 2, 3, 4 row spaces there, and that's sorted. So I would have that there and I would select a different color for that. I would go with this. Now for this also, I would have this color set to this. Now, just in case I forget to set the color of a text as I proceed, you go ahead and do that. So I would select this icon also and I'll change the color to this. And that's okay. Now, right under this recent transactions text, I would have those transaction cards there. So I would bring this in, which is the deposit card. I would give it a shadow style. I would come here. I would give it a mid shadow style there. Let's zoom out to this point and I would stretch this to this end here and I'll make sure this snaps properly too. And that's not going to be a problem because our component is responsive. So let's look at the spacing between this card and this text. I would zoom in. You can see we have 1, 2, 3. I'll make this 4 and let's zoom out. Okay, that's actually too far away. So I would bring this here. I would have 2 row spaces. Okay. So I would have this one here. So I would have 2 row spaces from this text to this card. And if I select the text, you'd see that I have 1 row space here and 2 row space before this card. And that's okay. So what I would do now is I would go ahead, I would duplicate this. And when I duplicate it, I would make sure I have just 1 row space, which is 8px. I would bring in this other one, which is for a withdrawal event. I would come here, I would give it a mid shadow. I would zoom out and I would snap this to this point. And I would make sure it's just 8px space. So I would bring this here and that's okay. Now I would have just 3 recent transactions here. So I would go ahead, I'd bring in this referral banner and I'll place it here. So I would make this snap to the end also to stay at that point. And I would zoom in and I would make sure I have a consistent space in here. So I would have a 48px margin space over here, which is going to be 6 row spaces, right? So I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'll bring this and I'll place it here. So I would zoom out. And at this point, what I would bring in will be a bottom navigation component. I'll bring it and I'll place it here. Let's zoom in. and let's make sure this is properly placed. As you can see, I have properly placed this. So I would keep it selected, come here, and I'll change the fill color to this. I would select this, change the fill color to this, select this, I would change the fill color to this. Now I would select the icon itself, and I'll change the fill color to this. I'll do that for this also, and I'll do that for this also. Now for the text, I would select the text and I'll change the fill color to this, and that's okay. Now for the text color of this navigation link, I'd like the text color actually to be pure white so that it can be really present there. And I think this is better, and that's it. So we have just designed our homepage now using the components that we created. So I would also advise that while designing, it's also good most times to test what you are designing. So I would select this, come here, and I would click on present to see how this is going to look like actually. So this doesn't look good like this. I'd like to present this inside an iPhone device. So I would come here, click on prototype, click on prototype settings, and I would select a device here, which is iPhone 13 Pro Max. When I do that, I would come here, I would select this layout once more, and I would click on present again. And that's going to sort it. And this is what we have. This looks good. You can come here and present this in full screen, just like this, to see it better. So let's go ahead and let's keep designing our application. So I would press the escape key on my keyboard to go out of that full screen display, and I would come back here. So the next action I would like to design for will be the action of the user clicking on the fund account button. So when the user clicks on the fund account button, I would like to display a pop-up that will allow the user choose the method in which they would like to fund the account with. And that's easy because we have actually created a pop-up before. So I would come here, I would duplicate this pop-up, and I would have the pop-up stay here. And right inside this pop-up here, I would have one button here, which is going to say bank transfer. And I would have another button here that's going to present the option to fund the account with a debit card. So I would have this stay here, and I would expand this to this point, and I would expand this to this point. I would also keep this here. I'd expand this to this point. I would expand this to this point. I would keep it selected, and I would center it horizontally. So I would come here, I would bring this downwards, and I would have a text here that's going to say select method. So I'll change the color of that text to this, and that's going to be cool. So I would select this pop-up now, and I would rename it from verify pop-up to fund method pop-up. I'd keep it selected, and I would make it a component, and that's going to be it. So when the users click on fund account here, they would have this pop-up show up asking them to choose the method in which they would like to fund their account with. Now, let's say they select the bank transfer method. They will be taken to the page where they would have that happen. So for that, I would create that page now. So I would come here, I would duplicate this, and I would rename it bank transfer. When I rename it to bank transfer, I would come here and I would take all of these out. And I would also take the bottom navigation out also. So what I would have here is an icon that will direct the users back to the previous page. So I would go to further icons. When I come here, I would scroll down and I would select this icon for that. So I'll take this out and I'll bring this here. And as you can see, this icon is not inside this layout. That's why the smart guide is not active. So I would come here, I would select this icon and I'll take it into this layout, just like this. Now, when I select it and I move it around, you would see that the smart guide is active. So I would make sure that I have 8 spaces from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's correct. So I would keep that icon select and I'll change the color of the icon vector to this. And that's okay. The next thing I would have here is a title for this page that's going to say bank transfer. You can call it whatever you want to call it. So I would use the headline 3 bold text for that. I would keep that there. I would center this horizontally actually, to be sure it's at the center horizontally. and that's fine. Now I would come here and I would have this here. So I would have these details here. So what I'll do is I would make sure I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I would have 8 row spaces there. I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what we are going to have here is a destination account details where the user should make the bank transfer to. So here is the account number, here is the account name, and here is the bank name. And that's it. So I would come here and I would have a button component here. I would align it to the center and I would stretch it to this point and stretch it to this point also. I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 7 and 8. So I would have 8 row spaces there. Now what I would have on this button will be copy account number. So the user can just click on this button to copy the account number here. So I have sorted the routes for funding the account on this app with bank transfer. So let's go ahead and let's create the page where the user will use to fund the account with their debit card. So I would come here. So I would change this debit card. I would align this to the center. That's okay. I would take this out. Then I would come here and I would take this out also. Then I would have all of this here. So I would have 8 row spaces from this icon also. So let's zoom in so that we can count better. So I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll keep this here. And I would have 1, 2. I would have that there. I would zoom out. So this is going to be the page that will enable the user fund their account on this app with a debit card. So what we have here is the user will enter the amount and have the option to select that they want to use the existing card that they have on this app, or they would like to add another card. So let's fix some alignment issues here. Let's keep this there, come here and keep this here also. Then come here, balance that there and keep that there also. I would also come here and make sure that this is sorted also here. So for the action of adding another card, we are going to see how to do that as we proceed. For now, let's go ahead and let's have a button component here. Align that to the center horizontally. Keep that there. Keep that there. Then for the text, I would say fund account. And that's that. So if the users click on the fund account button, they would have this pop-up show up for them to choose the method they want to use. When they select the bank transfer method, they would have this page show up. If they select the debit card method, they would have this page show up also. They would have this page show up. Now, if the user clicks on this fund account button when they want to fund their account with a debit card, the user will be taken to another page, which is going to indicate that their account has been successfully funded. So I'll duplicate this to have that there. Now, before we work on that page, I'd like to change the name of this page from bank transfer to debit card transfer. Now, for this page here, I would rename it to transfer successful. Now, I'd come here. I'll take all of these out. I'll take this out also. And I'd have a frame here, which is going to be 100 by 100 frame. Let's see how it's going to look like. That's quite small. So I'll make this 240 by 240. And I'll just work with this. So I would give it this color, yeah? And I would give it a corner radius of 200 to make it a circle. And I would go over to the feather icons plugin. And over here in the feather icons plugin, I would bring in this icon. And that icon will be placed on top of this frame. Now I would go ahead and I would use the scale tool to scale that icon to this point, just like this. Now, when you scale the icon, make sure that the constraint of that icon is set to the center horizontally and the center vertically. So I would come here now, I would select this icon and I would change the color of that icon to this. Then I would have a text here that would say count funded successfully. Now you can have whichever text you want to have there. That's fine. So I would come here and I would change the color of this to that. So after that, I would have a button component here that will redirect the user to the invest page. So I would say invest. Now, when they get to this page, they would have the option to click on the invest button here to go straight to the invest page where they can invest. So that's the next page we are going to look at. We are going to look at creating the invest page where the users can invest in stocks. So to create that page, it means that we need to create the component that the page will need. So let's go ahead and let's see how to create the components for that page. So for the invest page, the first component I would have there will be a little card component that will be used to display the cash amount that the user has. So I would come here and I would create that. This is the fund account component section here. So I would have the invest component section here. And to create that card, I would have this here. I would say cash, and I would use the body small text style for that. And I would have an amount here, just any amount is okay. So I would use body large bold here. Then I would select the both of them. I would create an auto layout on the both of them. Make sure the padding around items value is set to 0. Then I would come here and I would add a fill color to it to have that. Now select the cash text and set the horizontal resizing value to fill container, and do that for this other text under here, which is the amount of cash that the user has. Now when that's sorted, select the auto layout and then come here and set the spacing between items value to 4. Now I would go over to the feather icons plugin and I would look for an icon that I can use to represent cash there. So I would scroll down and I'll look for one of the icons here. So I am going to make use of this icon here. I would select it. I'll bring it here. Then I would select both of these and I would create an auto layout on the both of them. Now I would come here and I would make sure that the alignment value for this auto layout is set to the top left corner of the auto layout. So I would keep this auto layout selected. I would add a fill color to it and I would set the spacing between items value to 8. Then set the padding around items value to 8. Then come here and I would have the corner radius value set to 8 also. So over here, I would select this auto layout inside the main auto layout now, and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. And when I do that, you would see that this component will be a responsive component, just the way I want it to be. Now let's go ahead and let's set the colors for this. So I would set the color for this to that, and I would set this to this. Now for this icon, I would set the color for this icon to this. So I would keep this here. I would duplicate it. When I duplicate it, I would go ahead, change this to assets. Then I would leave the value here just like this, or you can change it if you want to change it. Now the next thing I would like to do is to take out that icon and have another icon there. So I would go to feather icons and I would have this selected for that. So I'll bring this here. Let's go to the layers tab here and I would select the briefcase icon here, which is this. I would select it here and I'll take it into the frame 19 auto layout, just like this. And you can see that it is staying here on the right side of the auto layout. I would grab it and I'll take it to the left side. Now I would select this one and I'll delete it. And I have that. So I would select this icon now and I'll change the color of this icon. And this is sorted. So I would rename this to cash card, whatever you want to call it is okay. And I would rename this to assets card, and that's okay. So I would select this, make it a component, select this, make it a component. So let's go ahead and let's create the other components that we are going to need on the invest page. So the next component I would need on the invest page will be an input field component that the user can use to search for top stocks that they would like to invest in. So we have an input field here already created. It's already a component. So what I'm going to do is I'll duplicate it. I'll bring it down here and I'll keep this here. Now, when you duplicate a component like this, the duplicate will be a child component. Now, I won't love to work with this as a child component. So what I'm going to do is I would keep the component selected, right click on it, and I would select detach instance. Now, when I select detach instance, you would see that this is back to a regular auto layout. So I would come here and I would change the name to search input field. Then what I'm going to do is I would go to feather icons and I would bring in a search icon. which is this. I would grab it and I would drop it inside this auto layout, which is the search input field auto layout. Now the issue is this. I want this search icon to be smaller than this because it's quite too big, and as you can see, it has increased the height of the input field. So I would keep the icon selected, come here, and I would set this to 12, and I'll set this to 12. And there I have that. Now I think 12 is too small. I would set this to 16, and I would set this to 16, and that's sorted. So the next thing is this. I would like this icon to stay on the right side of this input field. So how do we do that? Just select the search input field auto layout, come here, click on the alignment and padding property, then change this property from packed to space between, and that's going to be sorted. Now let's change the color of that icon. I'll change it from black to this. Now I can select it now and make it a component. And as you can see, it can be used just the way you'd like it to be used. So let's go ahead and let's create the next component that we are going to have on our invest page. So the next component will be the component that will display the list of stocks that are available to invest in this app. So let's come here. Let's have some space here. I would use the brand fetch plugin to pull up the logo of a brand. I would have this come here. I would type in Dangote. I would press the enter key on my keyboard, and I would have this here. So I would select this. I would click on it to select it, and I would have it there in my canvas. So I would bring this here, and I would make it a 24 by 24 frame logo, just like this. Now, when I make it 24 by 24, the next thing I would love to have is the price of this stock. I would have that. I would select the caption text for that. Then I would have this. Then I would have this. Make sure I use the caption text for that also. Then I would create an auto layout on this, and I would set the padding around items value to 0. Now I would select the text inside this auto layout, and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. Now I would like to have an icon here that will indicate decline or increase. So I would go to the feather icons plugin, and I would bring this icon in, and I'll place it here. Now I would make this icon a 16 by 16 icon, just like this. When I place it here, I would select both of them, and I would create an auto layout on the both of them. Now for the spacing between the auto layout, it's going to be set to 4. Now I would select this auto layout that's inside this frame 19 auto layout. I am talking about the auto layout that has this number here. I would select it. When I select it, I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. Then I would select the frame 19 auto layout now, and I would add a fill color to it. Now let's go ahead and let's select this icon, and let's make the color to be green, just to indicate progress, yeah? So I would come here now, I would select both of these, and I would create an auto layout on the both of them. Now for this auto layout here, I would set the spacing between items value to 8. It's already set to 8 for me, so I'll just leave it set to 8. Then I would come here and I would add a fill color to have this. I would come here, I would select this text now, which is inside this new auto layout, and I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. And for this, I would set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. Now, when I select this frame 20 auto layout, as you can see here, it's a frame 20 auto layout. When I select it and I resize it, you would see that it's a responsive auto layout, just like this. And that's what I want actually. So I would bring this here. Now I would go ahead to create a text that will signify the title of that stock. I'll just call it Dang. Now I would come here, I would set this to body large bold, and I would have this stay here with this text. Now what I'll do is I would select this and this text, and I would create an auto layout on the both of them. Now I would come here and I would add a fill color to this auto layout first, then come here and align the content of that auto layout to the center. After that, I would set the spacing between items value of that auto layout to 8 to have this. Now I would bring this here and I would have this here. The next thing to do is to have all of these selected. Then I would add an auto layout on all of them. Now for this new auto layout now, I would set the spacing between items value to 8. Then come here, select this auto layout and set its horizontal resizing value to fill container. Then I would select the auto layout now and I would add a fill color to it to have this. Now for the padding around items value, I would set it to 8 and set the corner radius value to 8, just like this. Now if I expand this, you'd see that I have this component looking just like this, and this is okay. So I would select it, I would name this to stock list, and I would make it a component, and that's fine. Now the next component I would like to have there on the invest page will be a component that will be used to display the list of stocks that the user have invested, literally the stock portfolio of the user. So I would come here, let's zoom in once more. I would have a 48 by 48 px frame. Then I would give it a corner radius of 100 to make it round. Then I would give it this color. Now I would go to the brand fetch plugins and I would look for the Paystack logo, which is this. Now I would come here, I would right click on this Paystack logo. I would like to take out the background color. So I would use the remove BG plugin for that. I would keep the logo selected and I would make it a 24 by 24 px logo, just like this. And I would place it right at the center of this circular frame that we have created. Now, when you place that on top of that circular frame, make sure to set the constraint value for the horizontal axis to the center and for the vertical axis to the center. So the next thing to do is to go ahead and I would say Paystack. I would keep it selected, come here, and I would use the body large bold text for that. And right under this Paystack text, I would have +345 just to represent the appreciation value of that stock. So I would keep it selected and I would come here and I would go with the body small text. Now I would make this to have a green color, just like this. And for the Paystack text, I would make it to have this color. So I would select both of these. First of all, create an auto layout, make this spacing between items value to be set to 4. Then I would select this text, set it to fill container. And for this, I would set it to fill container also. Now I would expand this and that's fine. Now the next thing to do is to select all of this, create an auto layout on all of them. When I create an auto layout on this, I would come here, I would set the spacing between items value to 8. And I would add a fill color to that to have this. Now, when I set this to 8, I would come here and I would set the padding around items value to 8. Now, I'd like for us to check to see if this is a responsive auto layout. And as you can see, it's not. And that's because I have not set the horizontal resizing value for this auto layout inside of it to fill container. So when I set this to fill container and I come here now, you would see that we have a responsive layout. So I would keep it selected. I would come here and I would set the corner radius value to 8. And there we have our portfolio listing component. So I would say portfolio list, and I would click on create component. So I think we have created all of the components that we are going to need on our invest page. So at this stage, I would like for us to go ahead and create our invest page. So I would come here now, I would select this, I would duplicate it, I would rename this to invest, and I would come here, I would take all of these out, and I would leave the bottom navigation component this time around. I would come here. What I would have first will be that cash card. So I would have 1, 2, 3, 4 space before that. I would say cash card. I would bring the cash card in here. And for this cash card, I would change the fill color of this cash card to this. I would select this and I would change this also to this. I would change the text color here to this. And for this, I would change this to that. So I would go ahead now and I would bring in the assets card and I would do the same to that also. I would come here. I would change the color of that to this, and this will be changed to this. Change this to this and this to this, and that's okay. So what I'll do now is I would arrange all of this to stay organized. So I'd like this to take up 2 columns, and I'd like this to come here and take up 2 columns. So let's zoom in to be sure that this is properly organized. So this is not properly organized, and that's because I want 4 row spaces before this. So I would bring this down here. When I select this, I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is okay. So I would bring this here and I'll bring this down here. So this is sorted. We have this section sorted. So the next section of this page will be the section where I would write a text that's going to say top stocks to invest in. So I would have 8 row spaces before this. So I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I would have this stay here. Now for the text here, I would like this text to be a body large text, not a body large bold text. Now after this text, I'd like to have that search field. So I would snap this to this point and I would go ahead to bring in that search input field, which is this. And I'll just have only an 8px space between this text here and the input field. So I would come here, I would stretch this to this point and I'll change the placeholder to search. So let's change this from stock to stocks, and that's fine. So the next component I would like to have here is the stock list component. So I would keep this here. I'd actually give it a shadow effect so that we can see that clearly. So let's zoom in. So I would give it 2 row spaces, 1, 2, and that's fine. So I would snap this perfectly, and I would like this to stop here, and I would like this also to stop here. Let's zoom out. So I would duplicate this. I would have this here also, and let's duplicate this here. Let's duplicate this here also. So let's zoom in to confirm that all our components are aligned perfectly. So you can see this is okay, this is okay, this is okay, and this is okay. So that looks okay. Now I would have a stock portfolio section. Now to differentiate the two sections, I would bring in the button component and I would use it for something different this time around. So I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 spaces. So I would have 12 row spaces here. I would zoom out. I would stretch this to the end like this. I would come here and I would align the content of this button now to the left. Then I would set its top padding value to 8 and the bottom padding value to 8. Now what I would have here will be stock portfolio. Now to make this look different, I would keep this selected, come here, and I would set the corner radius value to 0, just like this. Now what are we going to have here? We are going to have the pay stack component here. So let's zoom in and let's make sure this is properly organized. So I would have 1, 2, 3, 4 space before this, and that's okay. I would come here and I would give it a shadow effect just like this. Now I would keep this selected, come here, and I would change the color. So I would come here, I would change the color to this. So the green color here needs to actually be thicker than it is now, just like this. So I would make this to have 2 columns. Then I would duplicate it and have this stay here also, taking up 2 columns also. Now you can go ahead and have other stocks listed here, that if you want to have that. And here we are done with our invest page. Now since we won't be able to display all of the stock portfolio here, I would like to have a see all text here. So this see all text will be a button text. I would keep it here and I'll duplicate this see all text and I'll keep it here also, and I'll change the color of this see all text. I'll change it to this, and that's fine. Now the next flow will be this. Now let's assume a user likes this stock here and the user wants to invest in this stock. It means the user will click on the stock and the user will be taken to the stock details page, right? So let's make that happen. I would come here, select this page, and I'll duplicate it. Come here and change this to stock details, and that's fine. So for the stock details page, I'll take all of these out and I would zoom in, then go to the feather icons plugin to get that icon that signifies going back to the previous page, and this is it. I would get it, I'll bring it here, and I would make sure that this icon is actually inside the stock details page, and I'll take this to this point, and that's sorted. Now I would select the icon vector and I'll change its color to this. So what do we have here? I'd like for us to have a title here that's going to say stock details, and this text should have a headline 3 bold text style for it. So I would align it to the center horizontally, and that's okay. Now let's change the color to this, and that's fine. So what I would have here will be a component that I would create. I would just come here, I would have this frame tool selected, and I would create a frame with it like this. I would set this to 8, then I would set the color to this, then I would set the color to this, then I would go to brand fetch to get that logo, and I would place the logo right on that frame layout that I just created. So I would grab it and I'll place it here. Now I'd keep it selected and I would set the horizontal constraint to center and the vertical constraint to center, and that's okay. So what I'll do now is I would keep this frame selected, rename this to stock detail banner. Then I would come here and I would make it a component. So I would go to that page now, and over here I would have that stock detail banner component placed. This is it here. I'd have it stay here. I would stretch it to this point, and I'll stretch this to this point. That's okay. So I would come here now. Let's snap that in, and let's also make sure that this is snapped in perfectly, just like this. So over here I have 1, 2, 3, and let's make it 4. So over there I have 4 row spaces between this stock details text and this stock detail banner component, and that's fine. So let's zoom out. The next thing I would have here will be the stock price and the appreciation value. I would make sure I have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. That's okay. Now I would go ahead to create a component that I would place here, and that component will go into more details about this stock. So let's go ahead and let's create that component. So to create that component, I would come here and I would select the frame tool, and I would create a frame that's 42 px tall, just like this. Let's zoom into this point. When I create this frame here, I would come over here and I would create a text on this frame. I would say my position. I would keep this text here, just like that. And that's fine. Now for this text, I would use the body small text style that I have here, which is this, and that's okay. Now I would go ahead, I would create another text here. I would actually make this text box to be this wide, and I would come here and I would just type in 35. Now I would keep this text box selected now, and I would align the content of that text box to stay at the right. Select this frame layout now, and then make it an auto layout. Now I would come here and I would click on the alignment and padding value, and I would set the left padding to 16 and set the right padding to 16. Then I would set the top padding to 12 and the bottom padding to 12. Now I'd like this text to always stay here and this text to always stay here. So I would come here and I would change this from packed to space between, and that's okay. So if I come here now, you'd see that if I take this in, this is always staying here and this is always staying here. Same thing happens if I resize the left side here, just like this. And that's what I want actually. So I'll keep that selected, then come here now and select this text here to make sure this is set to hog content. Then come here and select this text to make sure this is set to fixed width, and that's okay. So I would select this and I would create an auto layout on this auto layout now, just like this. Now this new auto layout is called frame 25, yeah? So inside this new auto layout that I just created, we have this auto layout here, which is frame 24. I would select it and I'll duplicate it vertically, just like this. Now I would select the frame 25 auto layout, then I would set the space between the items inside the auto layout to 4. When I do that, I would come here and I would change the padding around items value to 0, just to have that. Now I would come here and I would set the color for this frame 25 auto layout to this. Now what I would do is I would set the corner radius value for this auto layout to 8. Now the corner radius won't be visible, and that's because this auto layout here is staying on top of that auto layout. So I would select this auto layout here, which is at the top, and I'll come here, I would click on independent corners here, and I would set the top left corner reduce value to 8, and I would set the top right corner reduce value to 8, just like this. I would come here, I would select this, click on independent corners, and I would set the bottom right corner reduce value to 8, and I would set the bottom left corner reduce value to 8, and that's sorted. Now for each of these rows here, I would select this, then come here and I would change its horizontal resizing value to fill container. I'll do that for this also, do that for this also, and do that for this. And that's okay. Now let's see if this responding how we actually want it to respond. And it is actually. Now let's edit these values that we have here. So I would come here and I would set this to open, and I would set this to previous close, and I would set this to market cap. Now for this, I would change the value to, so I would come here, previous close, I would say that plus this, and open, just any value there actually, just any value there will be fine actually. So with this, I have successfully created this component that I would use to show more details about that stock. So I would come here and I would call this detail table. Actually, I would call it stock detail table, and I would save that, then come here and make it a component. And here we have that. So I would zoom out and I would go over to this page and I would bring that component. So let's come here, click on the assets tab, come here, grab this and place it here. So I would keep it selected and I would add a shadow effect just like this. Then zoom in so that I can calculate the row spaces better. So from this item here, I would like to have 1, 2, 3, and 4 row spaces before this. Let's zoom out and let's stretch this to this point. And that's fine. So I can go ahead, select this text so that I would be able to change the colors. I would select all of this, come here and change this to that. Okay, this was not selected, so I would change it to that. And for this also, I would change it. Now the next component I would like to have here will serve as links just in case the user wishes to read more about the stock and the company that owns the stock. So I would go ahead and I would have that. It's going to be similar to what we have here. Now this is me creating this just the same way I created this stock portfolio component here. The only difference here is that I just changed the color from what I have here to this. So let's zoom in to be sure that we are placing our items properly. So I would come here, I would have 1, 2, 3, 4 row spaces before this, and that's okay. So at the bottom here, I would have a button component just for a user who is satisfied with what they see here on this stock details page. And this button is going to be an invest button. So I would zoom in to calculate the space better. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 row spaces here, and I would like to stop at the 6th row space, and that's it. So if a user likes what they see here on the stock details page, the user can go ahead and click on the invest button. If the user is not satisfied, the user can come here and click on this button to go back to the previous page, where the user will still have to see other stocks listed here. So that's it. So the next page here will be the page that the user will go to when the user clicks on this invest button here. I'd like us to go ahead and create that page. So I would duplicate this. So I would come here, I would rename this to enter stock amount. Whatever you want to call it is okay. So I would come here, I would change this to enter amount, and that's cool. So I would go ahead and I would have this here. Now this is me using an input field and a button, as simple as that. So I would zoom into this point and I would calculate the space better. I would select this item and I would calculate the space from that item. I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I would like 6 row spaces there. So I would select this and I would make sure that snaps perfectly. And that's it. Now the space between this input field and this button is 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's fine. I would come here and I would take out this invest button. And this page is sorted. Now, when the user enters the amount that the user wishes to invest in this stock with, the user will go ahead and click on this proceed button. Now, when the user clicks on this proceed button, the user will be taken to another page. Now, that page will be where the user will be presented with a summary of the investment that the user is about to make. Now, I would come here, I would select this and I would duplicate it and I would rename this to investments summary. Now, I would zoom in, I would come here and I would take all of these out and I would have this here. Now, this is going to be a summary of the investment that the user is about to make. And if the user is okay with the summary that the user sees here, then the user would go ahead and enter their secret pin here before they click on the invest button to finally make the investment. So I would come here, I would select all of these and I would calculate the row spaces better. So I would come here, I would keep this here. I would make sure that I have, let's zoom in. I would make sure that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 row spaces there. And that's cool. So I would zoom out to this point and this page is sorted. So this is the flow so far. Now, when the user is on the home page here and the user wants to invest, the user will click on this invest link at the bottom navigation here. This is it here at the bottom navigation here. When the user clicks on this link, the user will be taken to the invest page, which is this. And if the user goes through the list of stocks that we have here and the user is interested in investing in one of these stocks, let's say this one here, the user will go ahead to click on it. And when the user clicks on it, the user will be taken to the stock details page here, which is this. Now, when the user is taken to this page, the user will read about this stock. If the user likes what the user sees here, the user will go ahead and click on the invest button here. When the user does that, the user will be taken to this page where the user will have to enter the amount that the user wishes to invest in that stock with. Now, when the user enters the amount here, the user will click on the proceed button here. When the user does that, then the user will be taken to this page where the user will see a summary of the investment that the user is about to make. Then if the user is okay with this, the user will go ahead to enter their secret pin here. When the user does that, the user will click on the invest button here for the investment to be made successfully. So before we proceed further, I'd like to come here and change this to summary. So I would keep that selected and I would align it to the center horizontally. I would also come here, select this and make sure it's aligned to the center horizontally. Now I would come to this page, which is the invest page, and I'd like to have a title here. I'll change this to invest and I would align it to the center horizontally, just like that. Now, when the user clicks on this invest button here, the user will see a page that says investment successfully made or investment made or whatever, just a success message. So I would come here, I would select this and I would duplicate it and I would rename this successful investment and I'd save that. So what I am going to have here will be similar to what I have here. So what I would do is I would take out all that I have here on this page. I'll take this out also. I was supposed to take this out also, this debit card title here. I'll take that out also. I would select all of this. I'll duplicate it and I'll bring this in here just like this. And I would zoom in and I would just change this to success. I would keep it selected and I would align it to the center horizontally. Now I would come here, I would say go back home, and that's it. That's sorted. So far we have achieved the authentication task, we have achieved the funding task, and we have achieved the investment task. Now we are going to go ahead to create more screens that will actually make the user experience on this app to be better. So one of those screens will be the transaction details page. And that's the page that the user will go to when the user clicks on any of this card here under the recent transactions section. So if the user clicks on this card, for example, the user will be taken to a page where the user will see the full details of this transaction. So let's go ahead and let's create that page. So I would come here, I would select this one here, and I'll duplicate it, and I have that. So let's keep it selected, come here, and let's call this transaction details. And for the transaction details page, I'll take this out and I'll take this out. Now this is what I would have on this transaction details page. This is it, as simple as this. So first things first, let's calculate our row space to be sure that it's perfectly set. So I would have this here and I would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'd like this to start here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would snap this correctly and I would snap this correctly, and that's okay. So this here is to display the transaction date that transaction happened. So this is not complete actually. I can give some space here and say 1603, just like that, so that we will depict the date and time of the transaction. And that's cool. Now what we have here is the transaction amount. And here we have the amount in words. Here we have the transaction type, which is a withdrawal. Here we have the transaction remark, which is for Netflix. And the status of that transaction is successful. So I would select all of this, zoom in, and I would make sure I have 1, 2, 3, 4 row spaces there. Now for the button component here, I would select this and I would make sure I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would make sure I have 6 row spaces there, and that's fine. So if a user comes here and the user clicks on one of these transactions, the user will go to a transaction details page where the user will see more details about that transaction. So I would go ahead and I would create other pages that's going to make the experience on this app to be better. Now, before we do that, I would like to give this transaction details page a page title. So I would duplicate this and I'll bring it here and I'd call that transaction details. I would align it to the center horizontally, just like this, and that's fine. So the next flow that I would like to design will be the flow that the user will go to when the user clicks on this menu icon here. Now, when the user clicks on this menu icon, I would like for a menu bar to slide in with other options that the user can use to improve their experience on this app. So how do we make that happen? It's simple, yeah. So I would come here, I would have an iPhone 13 Pro Max here. I would rename this to menu slide bar and I would keep it selected. Come here and I would divide the width by 2, just like this. And I would have this. So I might decide to go ahead and increase this further. And what I'll do is this. I would come here, I would just have the logo here. And I would go ahead to have list items of menu links. So the first menu link I would have here will be recent transactions. I would keep that selected here. And I'll change this to a body small text, just like this. Now let's zoom in. Let's keep this here. I would keep it selected and I would create an auto layout on that text. Now this auto layout, I would like the auto layout to have a padding around items value of 16. And I would also like the alignment value to be set to the left. So I would come here now, I would keep this here, then create another auto layout on top of it. Now this new auto layout that I have created will have a padding around items value of 0, just like this. Now I would come here, I would expand this new auto layout here in the design 3. When I do that, I would select the recent transactions auto layout and I'll duplicate it just like this. Now I would go ahead to edit all of these to other links. Before I do that, let's select the main auto layout now, which is frame 34 here, and let's set the spacing between items value to 4, just to have that. So the next link here will be card management. I would have this be investment portfolio. I would have this be request statement, and I would have this be settings, and that's fine. So I would come here, I would select all of these text and I'll change the color to this, and that's what we have. So whenever the user clicks on this menu icon, this is going to slide out from the left, and that's okay. So let's go ahead to create the routes that the users will go to when the users click on this transact link here at the bottom navigation section. So to do that, I would come here, I would select this here and I would duplicate it. I would rename that to transact. Now I would zoom in, I would come here and I would say transact. Keep that selected and I would align that to the center horizontally. Then I would take all of these out. Now I would like to have 2 card components here, one for a withdrawal action and one for a deposit action. As simple as that. So let's go ahead and let's create those card components. So I would come here, I would create a text here. I would say deposit, and I would keep this text selected. Come here and I would go with the headline 3 bold text, just like this. Now I would come here and I would have a 48 by 48 px frame layout with a corner radius of 100. Then I would come here and I would give it a color that's green. Then go to the feather icons plugin and I would get an incoming icon there, which is this. This is our incoming arrow icon. I would place this here, then come here and set the constraints value to center and center. Now I would select the icon vector and I would change the color to this. So I would bring this here, select this, and then create an auto layout on it. Now for this auto layout, I would come here and I would set the alignment property to center. When I do that, I would come here and I would set the spacing between items value to 16. Then go ahead to add a fill color. When I add the fill color, I would come here and I would set the padding around items value to 8 to have that. Then I would go ahead to set the corner radius value to 8. Now I would come here and I would select the deposit text and change the horizontal resizing value from hog content to fill container. So this is the deposit action card that I would have on that page. Now I would come here, I would rename this to deposit action, save that, and then come here and click on create component. Now I would select this text and I would change the color to this. Now I would come here now, I would go to this page and I would bring in that component. This is it. I would keep it selected and I would give it a shadow effect. I would zoom into this point. I'll bring this here and I would make sure I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 row spaces. And that's okay. So I would stretch this to this point like this. And I would create a component for withdrawal. I would duplicate this component, which is the master component, take note, and I would detach instance. When I detach instance, I would select the circular frame there. I would make this red. I would select the arrow frame there and I would set the rotation value to 180 degrees. And that's sorted. As easy as that. So I would come here, select it, come here and go to the design 3 and rename this to withdraw action. When I do that, I would keep it selected and I would click on create component here. And that's okay. So I would come here now, I would bring this in, give it a shadow effect like this. I would have this stay here and I would spread this to this point. And that's okay. So finally on this page, I would love to have a button here that can be used to perform the adding of card action. So I would keep this here. I would have 16px margin space here, which is 2 row spaces, 1 and 2. I would keep the button selected. I would set the top padding value to 8 and the bottom padding value to 8. Then I'll change the text content there to add card, just like that. And that's sorted. So this is the page that the users will go to when the users click on this transact link here at the bottom navigation component. So this is where I would stop for this project in regards to creating screens. And I would stop here because we have achieved the actual user task for this app. Now, I would like you to take this as your own assignment, and when you are done, you can tag me to it on Twitter. My Twitter handle is, you can go ahead and tag me to your assignment on Twitter. Now, the assignment is this. I would like you to have a notifications icon here, and the notification icon should take users to a page of notifications when they click on it. And the notifications can be anything. It can be newsletters, it can be transaction notifications, it can be anything at all. Now place the notification icon here and create a notifications page that the users will go to when the user clicks on the notification icon. Now after that, come here and create a route or create a page that the user will go to when the user selects add another card. Create a page that the user can use to add their debit card details to this app. The third assignment will be this. Come here and create a page that the user can use to request for their statement. After that, create a settings page. Now on this settings page, let the user be able to set their secret PIN there. Now over here, which is the card management link, the user should be able to delete a card that they have added to this app or add another card that they want to add to this app. So that should be possible when the user clicks on card management here. This should take the user to a page where they would be able to see all the cards that they have on this app, and also they should have the ability on that page to add and delete cards. Now take note, this add card button here should take the user to the same page that you would create for this add another card here, just like that. And also this recent transactions link here should take the users to a dedicated page for the list of all recent transactions. This investment portfolio link here should take the user to a dedicated page of all the investments that the user has made on this app. So go ahead to build all of those pages so that you can have a full and complete user experience. Now, finally for the assignment, just before I forget, come here and create a forgot password page. Create a page here that the user can use to reset their password just in case the user forgets their password. And that's going to be it. So at this stage, what we are going to do is to create a prototype of all of these designs that we have created. We are going to link this perfectly and see how it's going to work. So to do that, let's zoom in. I would come here, I would start from the splash screen. So I would select it, come here, click on prototype. When I click on prototype, I would come here and I would connect this splash screen to this page. Now the action will be an on tap action, and that's because this is a mobile app actually, so we are actually supposed to tap the screen with our fingers. Now when the user taps on the screen, the user should move to or should navigate to, you can see the action here, should navigate to the auth selection page, which is this. Now the transition animation or the navigation animation should be a smart animation. So it's going to be an ease in animation. And I would like this ease in animation to be for 800 milliseconds. Actually, I would like this to be an ease in and out animation, just like this. Yeah, that's better for me. So I would come here now and I would say, okay, when the user clicks on the login button here, the user should go to the login page. And I would keep all of this set the way it is. Now, when the user clicks on the get started button here, the user should go to the sign up page. So I would come here, click on this login button here, and I would say when the user clicks on that login button, after passing in their email address and password, the user should go to the home page, which is this. Over here, when the user clicks on the sign up button, the user should go to the verification page, where the user will have to enter the verification code sent to their phone numbers. Now, when the user types in the verification code here, the user should click on the verify button. And when the user clicks on the verify button, this should show like a pop-up. So I would connect it to this. So I would connect this and I would keep it as on tap. Then for the action, I would have it set to open overlay. Then come here and I'll keep it set as centered actually. After setting this to centered, I would come here and I won't select this option. And that's because I don't want the user to close the pop-up if they mistakenly click outside the pop-up. I would like the user to click on proceed here. So this other option here, I would select it. This is the add background behind overlay property, or the add background behind overlay option. When I select it, it means that when the pop-up shows up, the background will be faded. So I would set the opacity value to 35%, and I would like the animation to be an instant animation, and that's going to be okay. Now, when the user clicks on this proceed button, the user should be taken to the home page. Now, when you are creating a prototype like this, you can just take the connection here to any page at all, then come here and set it to the page you want to set it to. So I would come here and I would select home, and you can see that the connection has gone to the home page, just like this. So the authentication is set. Now, when the users come to the home page here, and the users click on this menu icon, the user should be taken to the menu slide bar frame here. This is what should show up when the user clicks on that menu icon. Now, I would want that menu slide bar, or that slide bar menu, to actually slide in from the left. So I would click on this connection here to have the interaction details page show up. Now for the action here, I would set this to open overlay. I would come here and I would set it to manual. When I set it to manual, it means I would be the one to set how the interaction is going to happen. So I would grab this and I would place this here, just like this. This is how it's going to look like when you click on that menu icon. Now I would come here and I would say close this slide bar menu when the user clicks outside of it. I would select that, and over here I would have a background behind overlay property selected also, and I would have the opacity value set to 35%. Now for the animation, I would change this from instant to move in, just like this. And for the moving action, I would have it moving from the left, and I would have the speed of that animation set to 800 milliseconds. Now I would come here, I would click on this fund account button here, and I would say, okay, when a user clicks on this button, this should show as a pop-up. So we all know how to set a pop-up, right? So I would change this to open overlay, keep it set to centered, and I would add a background behind overlay action. And also, if the user chooses not to fund the account anymore, the user can just click outside the pop-up and go back to the home page. So I would select that. I would keep this set to 35%. And for the animation here, I would keep it set to instant. So I would close this. Now, if the user selects the bank transfer option, the user should come here. As easy as that. And if the user clicks on copy account number, this account number will be copied to the user's clipboard. And when that happens, the user will come here and click on this arrow here to go back to the home page. I would set this from instant to smart animate. and that's okay. So if the user clicks on the debit card option here, the user would be taken to this page. If the user is taken to this page and the user types in the amount that they are trying to actually fund their account with, then the user will go ahead to tap or to click on the fund account button here. And when the user does that, the user would come to this page where the user will have a message that says account funded successfully. Now at this stage, we are going to want the user to go directly to the invest page. So I would select this button now and I'll take this flow to the invest page, which is this. So when the user gets here, I'll take this menu icon out here actually. When the user gets here and the user wants to invest in one of these listed stocks, let's say this one, the user will click on it and the user will be taken to the stock details page. When the user gets to the stock details page and the user is okay with all of these details here, the user will click on the invest button here. And when the user does that, the user will come here and be required to enter the amount that they wish to invest in that stocks with. When the user enters the amount and the user clicks on the proceed button, the user will be taken to this page, which is where the user will see a summary of the investment that the user is about to make. Now, if the user is satisfied with this summary, the user will go ahead to type in their secret pin here and then click on this invest button. And when the user does that, the user will be taken to this page, which is a success page that's going to let the user know that, hey, you have successfully invested in that stock. So the user will come here and click on the go back home button, and I would take this back to the home page. I would select home here. So let's come here and let's see the other links that we have not created. So let's say the user is trying to see the transaction detail of any of these recent transaction here. Let's say the withdrawal transaction here. I would click on it to select it, and I would link this to the transaction details page, which is this. So if the user clicks on that transaction card there, the user will be taken to this page. And if the user goes through the whole detail and the user is satisfied, when the user clicks on done, the user will go back to the home page. I would come here and I would select home here. Same will happen if the user comes here, clicks on that arrow, the user will go back to the home page. So you can see that we are creating lots of connections and flows here. Lots of connections and flows here. So let's go back to the home page and let's see the flow that we have not created. So this is the home page here. So this home link here is safe to be there. Now let's say the user clicks on this invest link here, which is in the bottom navigation component. The user should be taken to the invest page. If the user clicks on this transact link here, the user should be taken to the transact page. So if I come here now, I would still connect this. This should go to the home page. And since this is the invest page here, it means we are here. So this should go to the transact page. I'll do that for this also. So let's come here and let's see what we have not connected yet. So if the user comes to the transact page here and the user clicks on the deposit card here, the user should have that pop-up show up that would require them to select if they want to deposit with bank transfer or their debit card. It should be the same flow. Now over here, I should actually change this to withdraw. If the user clicks on this withdraw card here, the user should be taken to a page where they would have to enter the amount and the destination bank that they are trying to withdraw their funds to. So this is also going to be a part of your assignment. Go ahead and create that flow. When you create it, go ahead and tag me on Twitter for my comment. So let's go ahead and let's present this flow and let's see how it's going to look like. So I would come here, I would select the splash screen, and I would come here and click on present. So when I click on present, I would have the splash screen show up here. When I click on it, I would have the option to either log in or get started. So I would click on get started. And here we are on the sign up form page. So if the user enters their email address, phone number, and password, when the user clicks on the sign up button, the user will be required to enter the verification code. When the user enters that, the user will click on the verify button here, and a pop-up will show up here saying phone number verified. Now you'd see that when I click outside the pop-up won't go away until I come here and I click on the proceed button. When I do that, I'll be taken to the home page. Now here we are in the home page. Now if I come here and I click on this menu icon here, you would see that this menu slide bar, or this slide bar menu, anyhow you call it, is fine. This slide bar menu slides in from the left. When I click outside of it, it goes back in. Now let's check the fund accounts flow. When I click on it, I would have this pop-up show up here that says select method. Now let's say I choose to select the bank transfer method. I would have this show up here. I would be able to copy the account number, and when I'm done, I would come here and I would click on this arrow icon here to go back to the home page. Now let's click on the fund account button once more, and let's select the debit card method. You can see that I'll be taken to this page where I would have to enter the amount that I'm trying to fund this account with. Now let's say I type in the amount. I would come here and I would click on the fund account button, just like this, and I would have this message that says account funded successfully. Now if I go ahead and click on this invest button, I would be taken to the invest page, which is this. And over here, I would see a list of stocks. Now, I would like to present this in full screen actually, so that we can see better. So over here, I would see a list of stocks that I can invest in. Now, let's say I would like to invest in this one here. I would click on it and I would see full details about this stock here. Now, I don't have some of my components showing here. So I would go back to my design. I would come here. So this is the stock details page. So these three buttons are actually not inside that layout. So I would select the three of them and I'll take them inside that layout. And that's sorted. Now when I come back here, you would see that I have that here. So let's go back to our full screen presentation. So if the user likes what they see here in the stock details page, the user will go ahead to click on the invest button here. And when the user does that, the user will enter the amount that they would like to invest in that stocks with. When the user does that, the user will go ahead to click on the proceed button here. Now that flow is not created. So I would come back to our design here. I would click on this proceed button here, click on prototype, and I would see what the problem is. So I came here and I clicked on this connection link here, and I changed this from on drag to on tap. Now when I come back here and I click on the proceed button here, you would see that we are taken to the summary page. Now this page will be the page where the user will see a summary of the investment that the user is about to make. And if the user is okay with this, the user will go ahead to enter their secret pin here and then click on the invest button. Now the invest button is not active also. I would come here and I would see the problem for that. So I would click on invest here and I would select the connection flow here. And as you can see here, there is an on drag event here. I would come here and I would delete that on drag event here. And I would just leave this set to tap. Now for the tap event, there is no navigation destination. So I would set this. First of all, I would take note of the screen here. This is the successful investment page. So I would come here and I would go to the successful investment page, and that's sorted. Now, when I come here and I click on invest, I would be taken to the success page. Now, when I click on go back home, I would be taken back to the home page. Now, that is after I have successfully invested in a stock. Now, what happens if I come here and I click on one of the recent transactions here, let's say the withdrawal transaction here, you would see that I would be taken to the transaction details page for that transaction. When I'm done going through it, I would click on done and I would be taken back to the home page. Now, what's going to happen if I come here and I click on this invest link at the bottom navigation component? I'll be taken to the invest page still, and I'll be able to still invest in a stock just like this. Now, what happens if I come here and I click on the transact link here? I'll be taken to this page where I would have the option to deposit funds or withdraw funds. And I would also have the option to add card. Now, if I am okay with this here, I would come here and I would click on this arrow to go back to the home page, and that arrow is not active. So I would have that sorted. I would come here, I would connect that arrow to the home page, and it's going to be an on tap event. So when I come back here, when I click on that arrow now, you would see that I am taken back to the home page. So go ahead, create the other pages and the other routes as your assignment, then tag me to it on Twitter. So that's that for this course. If you found this course to be helpful, go ahead, click on the subscribe button, leave a comment in the comment section, and stay tuned for more content. Thank you, and see you in another course.